ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I will call into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for August the 22nd at 7:03 p.m. I want to thank everybody for coming out to be with us this evening. We will start our meeting with the open ceremony. Mr. Wilbanks, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Please join us. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Next, we will consider administrative appointments. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session for principal for Nichols Junior High, principal for Atherton Elementary, assistant principal for Bowie High School, assistant principals for Bailey Junior High, assistant principal for Young, assistant principal for Adams, and an assistant principal for Butler Elementary.
Do we have a motion to approve the administrative appointments as discussed in executive session? Dr. Reich?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. So we have a motion by Dr. Reich, a second by Mr. Hogg. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, please vote. Okay, all vote in the affirmative.
Thank you, President
Motion
Mays.
passes.
This time I'd like to introduce the new principal for Nichols Junior High, Ms. Catherine Claiborne. Catherine attended UT Austin. Well, yeah, there must be some, no, nothing? Okay. UT Austin for a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish, Nova Southeastern University for Master of Science in Ed Leadership. Most recently, the assistant principal at Bowie High School and has been an assistant principal at Carter. Secondary ELA specialist in Fort Worth, 9th and 10th grade English teacher, and has also taught theater and Spanish in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So, Catherine, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. I want to thank you so much. I want to thank you for this opportunity so that I can thank as many deserving people as possible in the next 60 seconds. First, I want to thank my husband. I don't know if he's here yet. The cable guy was running late. But he's my number one supporter. He gets the late nights and the constant conversations about kids because he's exactly the same way. He's also an educator. He may need to tone it down a little bit because he fussed at two coaches for being late to my faculty meet and greet while he was carrying my things to my new office. To my boys, my heart, my loves, I'm so honored to make them proud of their mom. To Rennie Lizardo, I hope he knows he will never get rid of me. He is my mentor and my friend for life. To my Bowie team, for all that they have taught me and pushed my thinking, especially Brandy Johnson. To Beth Hollinger, FSLN, Dr. McDonald, Dr. Wirtz, the feeder principals who have texted me and lended their support. To Pete Cavazos, who hugged me right before my interview and helped calm me. Thank you, Pete. And to Dr. Tracy Brown, who always says, walk in your purpose. And I repeated that to myself before the interview. The interview process is no joke. And I was able to speak from my heart and walk in my purpose, and I appreciate her for that. And I'm so proud to be a part of the Nichols family. On the first day of school, I introduced myself to a student, Samantha, and she told me that the best thing about Nichols Junior High is the teachers. So I just want to say that I am humbled and I'm very honored to serve and empower all those faculty, staff, parents, students at Nichols Junior High. Thank you so much.
Next, I'll introduce the new principal for Atherton Elementary, Ms. Bianca Goldston. There you go. Bianca attended UT Arlington for Bachelor of Arts in Criminology and Criminal Justice, Louisiana College for Master of Arts in Teaching. Most recently, the assistant principal at Atherton Elementary, has taught 4th grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade, and has been a program manager as well. Bianca, congratulations.
Thank you. Good evening, President Mays, esteemed board members, and Dr. Cavazos. As an educator for 14 years, I've always focused on building relationships with students, parents, staff, and community members, providing exceptional instruction to meet the needs of all students, being fair and consistent with discipline, and making a school environment a fun and exciting place to work, learn, and grow. I hope I have accomplished this at Atherton, and I will continue to make these some of my top priorities as I move forward. I'm ecstatic to be a part of an innovative district that focuses on academic excellence as well as educating the whole child. Thank you for this opportunity. Tonight I have with me my amazing husband, Gerard. I just want to say thank you so much for your encouragement, your support, for cooking all the time at the potlucks, because I do not know how to cook. I want to say thank you for understanding that this is not an 8-to-5 job, and for me not seeing you as often as possible because I'm putting the students and the staff first, so I appreciate that. I want to say thank you to my parents who have prayed for me, encouraged me, supported me, and always instilled in me perseverance as a child. Thank you to my older brothers, Curtis and Michael. Those are my biggest cheerleaders, and so I just want to say thank you all. And thank you to all my family and friends who are here tonight to support me on this endeavor. Thank you to my former principal, Nydia Zaravar, for all her love, support, her guidance, and her mentorship. And this would not be possible without all these people in blue back here. So I just want to say thank you all so much. It has been an honor and a privilege to work with you all, and I hope to continue to serve and lead you. Thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown and Dr. Jarko for your leadership and everything that you all have taught me so far. Thank you to Dr. McDonald. I hope I continue to grow and learn under your leadership. And I just want to say thank you again so much for this opportunity. I am overjoyed to lead the Atherton All-Stars. Thank you.
Next, I'll introduce the assistant principal for Bowie High School, Mr. David Morrow. David attended University of North Texas for Bachelor of Business Administration, DBU for Master of Ed in Ed Administration. Most recently, a Social Studies and Career Tech and Business Management teacher in Fort Worth ISD, and has also been a financial service analyst. David, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank President Mays, Dr. Cavazos, and the entire board. I would also like to thank Ms. Beth Hollinger, Mr. Rennie Lizardo, and the entire administrative team at Bowie High School. I must say they are a wealth of knowledge. I have been working for about 2.5 days, and it's been the most exciting days ever. I would also like to thank Ms. Claiborne here. I was able to visit with her for approximately 1 day. And since she moved and got promoted, I was able to take over office. And I must say that you really made an impact because all of the students come to the office looking for you. And it's like, we have a new AP, so I just wanted to make sure I'll let you know that. But I promised them that I will uphold the values and remember the DNA that we shared, that we talked about there. I would also like to thank my parents who are here today, my brother and my wife as well, who is a lifelong educator as well. But my purpose here today is to greet everyone and again to say thank you for an amazing opportunity to take the 18 years of knowledge that I've learned. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking at the research when I was interviewing for Bowie High School was just that the students could use some outside community involvement. So I affirm that I will uphold the values of Arlington ISD in the state of Texas, although remaining forefront with my focus and thinking and bringing in stakeholders that can provide new and greater opportunities for our students. Again, I say thank you and good evening.
Next, introduce the new assistant principal for Bailey Junior High, Mr. Pedro Pete Cavazos. Pete attended UT Arlington for Bachelor of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership. Most recently, an assistant principal at Sam Houston High School, has been a fourth grade reading and writing and third grade dual language bilingual teacher, a pre-kinder dual language bilingual teacher, and a pre-kinder dual language paraprofessional as well. Pete, congratulations.
Thank you. President May, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, thank you very much. You heard that right. I was a pre-K teacher, and I thought I was going to be that for the rest of my life. I'd like to thank a lot of people, starting off with Mr. Fernando Benavides, who woke me up one Wednesday morning in summer, gave me an informal interview, and then brought me in to join the wonderful family of Sam Houston. I've been there the past 6 years. I've loved every minute of it. The hardest thing to do is to leave a place that you absolutely adore. And unfortunately, that's what I'm doing. But I'm bringing my heart, my passion to Bailey. This year is going to be the best. I want to thank Mr. Villarreal for allowing me to see what I wanted to do and to continue to grow so that I can one day be the Sam Houston principal. So there's a purpose. I love what AISD has done for me, from appointing me, Dr. Brown, for letting me go be the acting principal over at Crow Elementary. I thank Jamie McDougall and Lisnel Gonzalez for allowing me to come in and step in when they were at Holdsworth getting trained. And I one day hope to be able to pay it back to them some sort of way. I did do their fire drills, so that was taken care of. So thank you very much for allowing me to move over to Bailey, and I cannot wait to be part of the Ram fam, and we're going to have a great year. Thank you. I forgot the most important person or people, my beautiful wife. My beautiful wife, Stephanie, who's also an educator, and my crazy son, Chase, and my daughter, Kennedy, who is the captain of her soccer team, who is at practice right now. Thank you.
Pete, that was a good save. You know, you got to be careful. All right. The new assistant principal for Bailey Junior High, Takira Linson. Takira attended University of North Texas for Bachelor of Arts in Dance, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently, the dance teacher and drill team director for Bowie High School, and has also been the dance teacher and drill team director for Cedar Hill High School, or Cedar Hill ISD. Ms. Linson, congratulations.
Thank you. To President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, good evening. Thank you so much for this incredible opportunity. 6 years ago, I remember sitting in this boardroom observing my husband stand before you as he was appointed as the assistant principal of Young Junior High. I remember feeling proud, grateful, and humbled. And as I stand before you tonight, I have those exact same feelings, and I thank him for being my inspiration. Mr. Luzardo, I want to thank you for believing in me and for creating a culture that allowed me to grow. To my Bowie family, admin, Staff and FSLN, thank you for the amazing opportunities and the encouragement that you continue to pour into me. I would like to also thank my mentors, Kelly Hastings, Couture Madison, and Natasha Fowler. Thank you for growing and developing me into the leader I am today. To my daughter, London, thank you for being mommy's inspiration. And to my husband, thank you for being my rock, my support, and an incredible example. My loving family and friends, thank you for modeling or molding me into the woman I am today. You are my village, and I love you dearly. To Mrs. Benavides, thank you for the opportunity to serve beside you. I look forward to taking flight as we embark on our 50th year at Bailey Junior High. Thank you to the Bailey family for welcoming me with open arms. Every time I see you in the hallway, it's a hug, and I love that. I look forward to serving you, and I know it will be simply the best.
Next, the new assistant principal for Young Junior High, Ms. Sophie Heck. So it's a competition tonight, I guess. So Sophie attended Texas Wesleyan University for Bachelor of Science in Biology, UT Arlington for Master of Arts in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies, most recently a science teacher at Arlington High School, has been a tutor and has been an emergency department medical scribe. So Sophie, congratulations.
Thank you. President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, I want to thank you for the incredible opportunity to be a part of the wonderful leadership team at Young Junior High. I am blessed to be continuing my educational career as an assistant principal in this district that is truly dedicated to excellence. I want to recognize my first principal, Dr. Dalla, who invested in me to become the educator that I am today. I am grateful for your leadership, inspiration, kindness, and most of all, your honesty and words of wisdom that showed me what a leader should be. You've always pushed me to grow and take on challenges that you knew that I could handle and gain valuable experience from. Thank you for letting me walk the halls as part of your Colts family through the years. I also want to recognize Mrs. Humbles, my new principal, who leads with passion and excitement. I am thrilled to be joining you and the community at Young as kindred spirits. Thank you for seeing leadership and potential in me. I am honored to continue to get to know and serve the students, staff, and community at Young with you and Travis. And thank y'all for coming. I did not expect all of you here today. I'm grateful for my husband, who is my biggest cheerleader. You motivate me to be the best that I can be and are willing to share my heart with this vocation that I have chosen. Having your shoulder to lean on in days of hardship is everything. Thank you to my parents for raising me to be an assertive and capable woman. You've always made me feel like I can do anything I set my mind to. The life lessons that you taught me as a child have been integral to my success today. Many thanks to my colleagues, my friends, and the admin staff at Arlington High for walking this journey with me. I would not be here without the impact that each and every one of you have made on me. Thank you.
Next, introduce the new assistant principal for Adams Elementary, Mr. Ricardo Butler. Ricardo attended Southwestern Adventist University for Bachelor of Science in Elementary Ed, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently, a fourth grade teacher at Dunn Elementary, has been a patient care technician, a behavioral health technician as well. Ricardo, congratulations.
President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, thank you. Put God first. Hard work pays off. Follow your passion, and everything else will fall into place, were a few things that I was told on this journey. No one gets to this position on their own, and for that, I would like to thank some important people that guided me along the way. Mary Helen Burnett, she told me, Mary Helen Burnett, without you, none of this would be possible. Thank you for giving this young man from Georgia a chance. Be the best version of you, is what she told me. That taught me more about being a leader in life than a leader in education. Bettina Dixon once asked, what are you going to do with yourself? I told her, I want to be an administrator and make the biggest impact I can on kids. She told me, keep doing what you're doing and you're gonna be fine. To my rock, Jamie Butler, my wife, thank you for your words of wisdom. They weren't always subtle or compassionate, but always needed, and I understood what you meant when you said, get over yourself. This is not about you. Thank you to my mom who taught me about disappointment. It's just a setback, not a step back. Keep moving forward. Thank you to my dad who taught me that when you take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves. Thank you to my new family at Adams who welcomed me with open arms. Mr. Tave, who's already shared with me what God has planned for you, no one can deny you. And to our head coaching principal, Ms. Rhodes, thank you. She reminds us daily, if not now, when? If not us, then who? I humbly thank you all.
Last but not least, the new assistant principal for Butler Elementary, Ms. Amy Glossop. Amy attended Texas A&M University Commerce for Bachelor of Science in Psychology, Texas A&M University for Master of Ed in Special Education, most recently Curriculum Coordinator for Special Ed Department, has been an educational diagnostician, an assessment specialist, and a special education teacher. Amy, congratulations.
Thank you. President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, I'm last, so I know my job is to wrap this up. But first off, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to be a part of the wonderful Butler Elementary. Butler is special. It's full of great people doing great things for students every day. It truly inspires me to be there. I'm so excited and honored to serve the staff, students, and families of the Butler community. I know that the school and staff, and especially myself, will flourish and grow under the leadership of Principal Jennifer Bohannon. I'm grateful for the support of my colleagues who I've met so many great ones here in this district, my friends and family. I have my 3 biggest cheerleaders here tonight. My husband, Clint, who I think after this first week didn't know what he's getting himself into. My 3rd grader, Eli, and kindergartner, Jax. I'm very proud that my children are a part of this premier school district. Lastly, I want to thank 3 amazing AISD principals that supported and mentored me along my leadership journey, Beth Ann Woodard, Jennifer Bohannon, and Stacey Humbles. Thank you, ladies, for your wisdom and for your time. I'm so appreciative for this opportunity to grow as a leader. Thank you.
Thank you much to everyone. So as is our custom, we ask that the appointees follow Mr. Kale to the lobby for a receiving line so each of us can meet you and welcome you. If you would please, audience, let the board go first, we would appreciate that, and afterwards we will take a brief break. Thank you. now call this meeting back to order. Next on our agenda is public hearings, and we have none this evening. Next is open forum for agenda items. Ms. Benjamin, do we have any cards? Okay, no cards. We will move on the agenda. Next is our discussion action item. Consider the schematic design for Gunn Junior High Academy of Fine Arts and Dual Language. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mason. This evening, we'd like to bring forward the schematic design for Gunn Junior High, the Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy. As you know, the board approved the hiring of architect for this project, knowing that the timeline for its completion is right around the corner as the students are progressing through elementary school. And so I want to thank ahead of time the staff and Dr. Wirtz, Dr. Anderson, and everyone involved, Kelly, with this project. It has been a journey, and I think we've learned a lot, but also discovered a lot that you'll hear tonight. So proud of the schematic design that you're going to hear about tonight. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Wirtz to start us off.
Gunn Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy. This has been a project I think has been coming for some time with great anticipation for our community and our students who entered the program young as kindergartners and are rapidly growing and getting to the place where they are beginning to think about where they're going to be going to school moving forward. So tonight I'm going to share with you a little bit about our program implications or response to the space, and then you'll receive some an actual visual of the schematic design and some details from the architect, and then of course we'll come back and share some details about how that impacts both dual language and fine arts. So we want to remind the audience and ourselves about our mission, which is to empower and engage all students to be contributing, responsible citizens that strive for their maximum potential, specifically through what we call relevant, innovative, and rigorous learning experiences. And we stopped to highlight this mission statement once again because this program, the Fine Arts and Dual Language program, really falls into that category of being highly relevant, programs that are intended to engage students in things that will pique their interest and actually apply to their lives in an innovative way, while at the same time encouraging them to stretch their minds through rigorous learning and through doing so in an environment where they can learn 2 and possibly 3 languages at the same time. So the Fine Arts Dual Language Academies were born out of the 2014 bond, and we opened our doors in 2015-16 with a cohort of kindergartners, 197 to be precise. And that process has actually grown. Last year alone, we received 476 applications for these programs. They're very, very popular, and our students are thriving in each of these programs. And so tonight I wanted to spend some time before we got into the schematic design itself and the building itself to talk a little bit about the academic portion of it, and then Dr. Anderson is going to share with you a little bit of details regarding our program response in the fine arts area. So dual language, what is dual language? Dual language is not the same as what you would typically find in a traditional late exit bilingual model. Dual language is a model where students are taught content, meaning mathematics and science, in a target language. So rather than what you would normally look at as a foreign language instruction, meaning you go to high school and you might take a language other than English, like Spanish, in that course you actually learn Spanish as the subject. In a dual language environment, you learn the language through the content area. So just like kids grow up in class and they learn to read and write in English, kids that are taught in the dual language learn to read and write in Spanish and read and write in English, and their interaction with their teachers is contained in a specific language. So if you were to walk into a dual language classroom where Spanish is occurring, they would be taught mathematics in Spanish, and it would be an immersed environment where everyone around them is speaking Spanish, the room is written in Spanish, everything's in Spanish, and then when they go to the English side of the house, it's the same. So at Corey and Jones, that's a really important component because the way the program was designed, from the moment they step into the classroom in kindergarten, half of their time is in Spanish and half of their time is in English. And as they matriculate through the years, one of the questions we've had to ask ourselves is what would that look like, or how does that look like as kids matriculate through their secondary school years, where they're now learning more complex ideas in content courses, and they're in an environment that's not necessarily completely contained like you can find in an elementary classroom. So I thought I would share with you a slide that would kind of articulate a general conceptual pathway that we are thinking about. So the first part is the beginning stages of dual language. So it's dual language immersion. And it operates pretty much like I just described in the classroom in the elementary. When you get to secondary, you have a choice to make as a school district. We have to make a choice programmatically, like how do you go about addressing this? As we went across the country, we saw some school districts that chose to address the continuation of language development through advanced coursework. But it really moved more to a place where kids were simply learning Spanish in a Spanish classroom, kind of the way I described LOTE courses at the secondary. What we've been thinking about and looking at is how do you continue the dual language immersion experience for students so they can become more and more proficient in their language in reading and writing, speaking and listening, and do it around complex ideas and content areas rather than just learning Spanish, for example, for the sake of Spanish. So our intent is to seek to provide that continuum of service or a continuum of learning through the dual language immersion environment as they matriculate all the way through their secondary years by identifying specific courses where those courses can be continued taught in the target language. So if I go to Gunn Junior High, for example, and I'm a dual language student, I could anticipate my experience to be some of my courses may actually be still taught in Spanish and some of them will be taught in English. But at the same time, I could also begin to gain high school credit by engaging in advanced coursework. For example, AP Spanish would be a good example. As kids move into high school, new opportunities become available to them. We have AP courses that are there for them, of course. We have those in multiple languages. Specifically, we have Spanish for these two academies. And then the IB diploma program. The IB diploma program is a unique program because students that participate in the IB diploma program take at least one subject from studies in language and literature. And if they take 2 studies in language and literature in 2 different languages, then they qualify for to obtain a bilingual diploma. Either of these 2 pathways that kids participate in, if they meet certain requirements and they graduate, they can graduate with what we call a performance acknowledgement for outstanding performance in bilingualism or biliteracy. And in essence, what happens is students who complete and pass their ELAR coursework with an 80 or higher, and then satisfy one of several requirements, which would include things like demonstrating proficiency at a level 4 or higher of a foreign language, or taking 3 foundation core subject areas in a target language and passing those with an 80 or higher, or getting a 3 on an AP exam, a LOTE AP exam, or scoring a 4 or higher on a LOTE IB exam. Those are just a few of the requirements. If they meet these requirements, then when they graduate, they will receive what we call a biliteracy seal on their diploma, which are on their transcript, which articulates to the college of their choice that they go to that they are proficient in another language. So our goal as we go to Gunn is to start to think about how can we begin to enhance this experience for students. When 6th graders come to Gunn, how can we make that experience even more in depth than what you would typically be able to even get in an elementary environment? And how do these things then begin to prepare kids for their future? When we think about dual language programs, what we have to think about is the idea that our students are trying to prepare themselves for a workforce that is very global. And we know that kids that can speak and interact fluently in 2 languages are much, they're set up for success in an environment where that's actually happening. So as we moved into programming the schematic design for Gunn, this is one of the components that we began to consider. What role does language play? How does language interact with the fine arts environment? How does the space need to look to do that? So in order to do that, the team started the process by engaging in assessment, and then through that assessment, beginning to collaborate with many minds actually across the district, which included community members, parents, teachers, and staff to really start to design the space, which you're going to see tonight. So what I like to do first is turn the time over to Kelly, who's going to talk a little bit about the capital needs assessment, and then we'll move into the architects and then our actual outcomes. So.
Good evening, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. So as Dr. Wirtz mentioned, we started this process 2 years ago when we began the assessment for the district-wide. And so some of the people that helped us were in this room and many others are not, but we had architects, engineers, consultants, campus principals, the plant services staff, department heads, and many others who helped us with the assessment, all of which though was aligned in and around the program needs of the district. And so after we completed that and we developed the needs and accounted for all of those things, then we began to look at prioritization of those needs and master planning those needs. And we've talked a lot about this, but we compartmentalize those in the form of more of a 15-year program versus just a 5-year. But this first prioritization one group of needs is our 2020 through 2025 package. And so in response to incredible interest and growth in the Fine Arts Dual Language program, the district planned for an expansion at the high school, the junior high school level and the high school level, as Dr. Wirtz mentioned moments ago. In this program, in the 2019 program, funds have been included for a classroom addition and also renovations to Gunn Junior High School, and then also to a high school which will be named at a later date. We engaged Stantec architects to help us with the design of this particular project, and they, as you probably will remember, helped us with Corey and with Jones also. And so while those are elementary schools and maybe not seem quite as complex, they've also worked on the Seguin High School project, where while we were in an active school, we made an addition plus renovations to that campus. So they're very familiar with this type of work and capable of this kind of project. And so schematic design has been prepared, again, in coordination with our educational programming needs. And at the same time, like I mentioned, we plan on addressing all of the facility needs, condition needs at the same time. And so at this point in time, I'll introduce Mr. Diego Barrera and Mr. Jonathan Aldis. They'll present the schematic design for Gunn Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy.
Hello. Well, I'm happy to be here with you guys talking about the Gunn Academy. I'm gonna skip a couple of these because these are not mine, but I'll jump into these slides. And what I really wanted to talk to you before I show you the schematic design for the school is about the process we went through. As Dr. Wirtz was saying, we started first meeting with a large group of community members. We had teachers, we had community leaders, arts and science leaders, arts leaders in the district, and we had a lot of input, and we spent 2 days really coming up with the vision for this campus, right? So we knew this same team worked 2 years ago, or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, on both Jones and Corey. And so we were glad to come back and revisit this vision, but we knew that this vision was going to mature into the academy. So we wanted to spend these 2 days and really listen to the leaders in your community, talk about what the experience for these students was going to be in junior high school, and how the dual language and the fine arts would mature into that experience. So through a series of activities, we explored what the vision of the campus would be. We explored through a series of exercises what the activities would be in the junior high school level. So what would the students look like? So we visited what would be the typical day for a student, and that all gave us a lot of information to not only understand programmatically what kind of spaces we needed to create for these students to succeed, but it also started painting a picture about the vision of what the academy should be. So I'm not gonna read all this to you, but I really wanted to focus on these 3 words because we heard this through our conversation. The academy at the Dual Language and Fine Arts Academy at this level, at junior high school, created a sense of freedom in the students. And the freedom was in that while in elementary, they're exploring every single instrument, they're doing dual language. At this level, they're starting to get a little bit of choice, right? So they might decide to focus on one instrument. So creating spaces around that. Creativity, obviously, is something that is highlighted both in the arts, but also in the dual language. So we saw that this was something very important and something that the building needed to speak to. Empathy was one that we heard a lot in different settings. And when we started talking about the whys, about why it was important to have a dual language academy, a lot of the discussion was around these students really being great global citizens, being able to connect with people that is different from them, being able to use the arts as a way to understand people from different backgrounds, from different cultures. And we thought this was really powerful. So it was something that we wanted to celebrate. So one of the things that we also talked about a lot was the fact that this school, even though it's a brand new dual language and fine arts academy, it's also an existing school. It's also the Gunn Gators, and they want and everybody in that room wanted to celebrate that and celebrate that culture, make sure that that stayed, and that was celebrating this next chapter for the school. So this idea of a swamp kept coming back, right? The swamp for the Gators. So for me, that I didn't know that campus that well, I learned that the swamp was where the students gathered. That's what they call it. So we wanted to bring that idea back and sort of keep it in our minds as inspiration to speak to how the design gets solved. So a lot of the patterns, a lot of the colors that you see are sort of inspired by that idea of the Gunn Gator. So we start taking those patterns that we see sort of in that swamp image and bringing that organic nature into the architecture of the building. So with that, I'm gonna pass it to Jonathan, who's gonna show us a little bit of how that got resolved.
1 minute early. Nice job, Diego. If you can't tell, Diego's very excited about this project. So I want him to speak to that front end. He spent a great deal of time working through that process, and he's obviously very invested, as we all are. So I'm going to try and show you what that translates to. All those words turn into images, and architects should show very little words and lots of images. So just to put it all in scale for you and remind you, if you haven't been to the Gunn campus lately, Gunn has one very specific design issue. There's quite a few, but one very distinct one is it's actually two separate buildings, if you remember right, correctly. You've got an office area that's inside of a building, completely separate from a dining and athletics building. So while the floor plan has changed a bit, again, we're in schematic design, so things are changing. This slide is just intended to illustrate the scale of what we're talking about. Everything that you see in red is new addition. So to back up for a second, there's the existing Gunn, and this is the sort of scale of addition we're talking about to accomplish all the way out here. The addition kind of on the left side of the image is kind of the easier piece. That piece in the middle, as critical as it is going to be a little bit of a challenge to do, obviously, in an existing building. But wanted to point out to you the overall scale of it. I'm not going to walk you through every space in the building because I don't want to take that much of your time. I'll give you the color keys and I'll orient you to the building. On the bottom of your screen, that would be the Fielder Road side of the building now. That's kind of what you think of as the front door to Gunn now as you come into that entry, kind of atrium, not atrium, but outdoor courtyard space. Part of this design, and it'll make sense on the site plan when I show it to you here shortly, is to, knowing how many students we're going to have on this campus, try and improve our traffic situation around the site. And part of that involves moving the front door literally all the way around the building so we have queuing and stacking on site versus on Fielder. Don't know that we'll ever avoid having cars on Fielder, but we can certainly pull a vast majority of them around the building. So what you see on the top of your screen in red is the administration area, and that is essentially the new front door. There's sort of a central spine through the building. You see doors on the bottom of the screen. Those are not intended for students to be coming in the morning. We're still trying to bring everyone around to the top of that screen that you see there. So the red, very quickly, is your administrative suite. Of course, you have your secure entry. One of the other unique designs of Gunn as it stands now is you have a two-story library volume in the middle of the building. And as we talk about changing into a fine arts campus, there are some spaces that need that volume. And so a natural segue here for this is to take that space and it now becomes the dance room and the theater room back to back that can take advantage of that high volume and can still have visibility from those upper hallways. So even the arts can be on display from the academic areas above that space, which is kind of a dynamic space. But as you walk in, the first thing you're going to see, and we'll show you in the renderings, is the student gallery space, the space that you see off the main spine there. Again, trying to reemphasize every day that arts are a part of everything that's done on this campus. As you move off to the left of that image, everything that you see in blue is kind of core classroom space. So you'll notice in a lot of the addition, it's a lot of core classroom space regained because the purple imagery that you see wrapping around, those are fine arts, performing arts, visual arts spaces. So band, orchestra, choir stay generally where they are with massive renovations. And I don't want to forget to say, if you've been in Gunn recently, our goal would be when you walk in Gunn at the end of this, you will not recognize the Gunn that you see now. So this is not about adding a classroom addition on and a limited paint job. The scope of this is to rework Gunn in its entirety so the students understand that this campus is a special place, and frankly, it has some updating that needs to be done regardless of that. But crossing the new sort of common space, the swamp, that I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around a rallying phrase of the swamp, but the staff very much loves it, so we call it that, sort of that central piece that you see in the yellow of the media center and the dining. is new built space, which would be the swamp, and it's a 2-story volume space because we're infilling between 2 buildings. Dining stays where it is, but it is radically expanded, both in size because we're adding capacity, and frankly, we need more space in dining, kitchen as well. So we're doing a little bit of work to both of those to accommodate capacity. And then the stage is being rebuilt to be something more suitable to a fine arts campus. So there is some performance space. Keeping in mind, and we've had a lot of discussion about this, large-scale performances, you're building a really great facility for. So some of those would still go off campus. This is not intended to replace that. It's intended to be a appropriately scaled for a junior high presentation, recital, all sorts of events, pretty flexible space. And you'll see that in the imagery. And then finally, going back to the top of the image, the existing gyms would remain, again, with finishes replaced. If you haven't been in Gunn, I'll just refresh your memory. It's the version of the old athletics where boys had the ground floor and girls had the locker rooms on the second floor, and there's not an elevator, there's just 2 stairs. So there's some accessibility issues is the easiest way to say it. But this will be resolved in this design. You're now seeing all of the locker rooms moved to that ground floor level. So there's equities, both sexes have access on the ground floor, and we've actually added an entry on the right side of that screen. That actually goes out to where you think of as the parking space for Gunn now. The goal would be that gym could be used after hours, and this could actually be your entry for that, and we can now start to close off the sections of the building. If you've been to a basketball game there now to use the restroom, you have to climb an 8-foot flight of stairs out of one building, go across if they'll let you into the other building. We had a lot of discussion about that. That's resolved in this design as well. So there's restrooms on this portion as well as restrooms on the other portion. Moving upstairs, you can see is heavily academic with the blue representing core classrooms with some special things to point out. You'll see the red interspersed in there as well. A lot of conversation here has been around still having administrative suites kind of dispersed throughout the building. This becomes a large student body. It's a good idea to have assistant principal suites or counselor suites throughout the building. So that's what you're seeing in those spaces. And the other special element about this is the element you see at the top, the Fab Lab. So it's a fabrication lab where quite literally arts that are designed in the 2D, 3D labs, frankly, in any program now have a place to go to be created beyond just the art classrooms. I neglected to mention that on the ground floor, art has been left on the ground floor so that they have access to the exterior, and our goal would be that along Fielder Road, there's a small outdoor art courtyard. There actually is an art courtyard there now. It's a bit underdeveloped. So that would remain and get improved a bit in the future as well. Sorry, I'm making sure I don't exceed my time after I gave Diego fits. So on site plan, this makes a little bit more sense. The building is oriented, like I told you, on the bottom is Fielder, and Paisley Road is on the left side of your image. You can see the new front door and the amount of stacking that comes around to that new front door. The parking, we're targeting around 340 to 350 spots is what you see represented there now, which is a sizable increase from what's there. And also is a tremendous amount of stack improvement to allow you to get parents off of the roads and onto the site. To show you what that looks like, here's your existing imagery, and just to be difficult, I've rotated it on you. So Fielder's now at the top of your screen, so stay with me for a second. So here's the existing Gunn. Here's what that looks like, and I think it always loses its effect if you don't see it. If you pay attention to the gym, for instance, you can see the infill. If you look at the gym on the left of your image, you can see the infill piece that closes in and the piece that's off to your right side as well. So with that in mind, I want to show you that first view triangle that you see there, which is essentially the new front door of the Gunn Academy. To your left, you're seeing the brick of the existing gym. We're not trying to reinvent everything on the building. We are trying to skin it back in areas that make sense that the new addition does not look like a pieced-on addition, and there's some work that needs to be done to the existing exterior as well. So even to the right of this image, the existing building is there. We're proposing there's some brick paneling that basically is applied over the surface of it and begins to blend the two additions or the two buildings together, so one doesn't stand out from the other. What you're seeing in front of you as you walk up to the building, that high glass is the media center that I showed you and the fabrication lab on the floor above that. Taking a slightly different view, remember I mentioned that 8-foot walk upstairs to get from the gym. We've been able to take advantage of that. In this image, the gym would be off to your left. You're looking at the library space, and that gives us a chance to have a small outdoor gathering space outside the library as well. The front door is kind of off to your right side in that image. We did have a lot of feedback that we didn't want the building to look like it had turned its back on Fielder, and we're now looking at the back side of it. And so this image starts to show you what the new backside approaching Fielder would be. The piece that you see in the middle is actually the new dining room. On each side of that dining room is, in the dining room are portions of glass because it is first and foremost a dining room. It's also a performing arts space. But this starts to give you an idea of the reskinning you see off to the far left of the image. That's the existing building being reskinned with the new paneling system. Moving inside quickly, I mentioned as you walk into the building, the first thing that's the center of the building is that gallery space. Here we're working within the existing building, so we're single story, trying to keep it simple, that can be reconfigurable with simple hanging partition systems, whether it's a 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional exhibit on display. We've thrown random cellists in there as well, so who knows what all you may have involved. The goal is that you have that flexibility to do absolutely anything with some of these spaces, and so that, I think that accomplishes that well. Moving to that dining, this is no longer what you would think of as a junior high dining. It is still a dining room, but we're effectively raising the ceiling so that the stage is a performance side stage. And so this is that image that I was talking about. You saw it from the street side, the outside, and to the left and right of that image is glass. We really are keen on having natural light getting into that dining room during the day, and during performance, that actually now doubles as side wings on a stage with simply pulling curtains across. So we're not building a full stage with side wings. You're building a functional stage that can be modified for performances, but is sized for the band program to fit on there. We've had that conversation as well. Turning around in the swamp and looking back toward the media center, now the dining would be kind of to your back. The dining center again drops down, or the media center drops down, and up above there you can see the fab lab. So they're visually connected but separated because we're not quite sure how much noise will be generated in the fab lab. So you're starting to see those spaces visually connected but separated acoustically. A little bit closer to the media center, and again you see the fab lab above that. So obviously this media center was a big part of our discussion in terms of being the center of the school and the area around it is more than a library, but a gathering space in the center of the heart of the building. And then turning back around and looking at that from this direction, you can see the dining. Back beyond that and to the left would be the entry down into the athletics area as well. And then finally, what does a fab lab look like? Well, it looks something like this. It's really just an eminently reconfigurable space. Plenty of power, plenty of data, and as we work further along in the documents, we'll have more definition, but it's really a place for applied, putting into practice everything that's being designed throughout this building and all the programs. So with that, I will turn this over to Dr. Anderson.
Thank you. So I have an opportunity here to tell you just a little bit more about how we would utilize the spaces in terms of the fine arts, and I want to thank Stantec for laying that out. They've mentioned a number of things, but I think it's important to understand a little bit about the pathway that we took to get to the usage of this. What we have here, when you look at it, really is quite simple as you look at it, but the process to get here was extraordinarily complicated, and built into this are some really effective uses for acoustic control and for also lighting control, just to make sure that we have a space that's flexible to be able to handle any types of programming that we might put in there. We know that the programming over time will continue to develop like any great artistic space does, and I believe very strongly that the design that we've come up with here is extremely flexible. So within the visual arts, to start there, the first piece is obviously the dedicated 2D and 3D art spaces that you can see in your design, and that builds upon the training that students are receiving at Jones and at Corey. As they come up, they are being exposed to all kinds of three-dimensional art and getting opportunities there. As they move to Gunn, they will then have the opportunity to really expound on that in large and very sophisticated classrooms, and also then to move that to the digital side, which is where the fabrication lab comes into play. So to sort of simplify this in terms of what is a fabrication lab, basically what we're doing is we're taking the art that's created in these spaces and we're digitizing it. And then the computer can reproduce that in a physical three-dimensional form, either through a 3D printer or what we call a CNC router, which is a computer-assisted wood design router, or a vinyl cutter. So those are just the types of equipment that could go in there. But again, this is a technology that we see in the professional world, but very few school districts will have access to this kind of technology. This is a very unique space. And so as a result of that, then this begins to reflect the kind of design concept that we talked about with a development of the Fine Arts Center. So it's just really unique spaces, and these pieces tie together really well, which was part of the overall design. We also have the outdoor patio that was discussed, which is also a great collaboration space. Theater can come in that space too and collaborate there for set design, and also just the ability to access nature from the classrooms, immediately from the classrooms, is also an important part of art. I think we all understand that. Lastly, the gallery that was that you saw renderings of, which it's absolutely a fantastic look to it. It does hearken to the fact that we have this amazing gallery going in at the Fine Arts Center, and there are very intentional connections made there, especially from an instructional design concept. So this is a space where students can curate shows, and they can start really in a space that's designed and master planned for the top level of visual arts design. And they can be a part of curating those shows, and also then a natural place for them to hang their artwork. And there's some really cool things that if you look closely in the design, you can see where we're able to hang things in unique ways. And we still have, I think, items to work out in terms of what that's actually going to, how that's going to manifest itself. But those opportunities do exist, and that flexibility is an important part of what that space looks like. So as we move on, we move into the performing arts side. And as you know, at Jones and Corey, we have piano and dance and theater, which are unique offerings in those spaces, in addition to the preparation that those students have for what would be your traditional band, orchestra, and choir courses. So we're bringing all of that together now at Gunn, and we have these great spaces that will allow us to do all kinds of different things. So I want to take you real quickly through how we got to the stage space that we're in, because you may have questions about that. It's very difficult, certainly from a financial standpoint, but also from a space standpoint, to be able to get all the way to an auditorium space that functions acoustically like an auditorium space. It's a very limited space in terms of what it can do. And it was clear that we needed a really flexible space that could be used for dining and used for all of these things. But it is a significant step beyond what you would consider to be a traditional cafetorium space. So we have looked at this with an eye toward acoustics, with an eye toward lighting control, and with a stage that is significantly bigger than what you would be accustomed to seeing. So the stage space that you see, perspective is always a difficult thing with the renderings, but the stage space that you see is actually larger than the existing stage at Arlington High in terms of its width, just to give you an idea of the size of that space. So it's a little shallower, but we've worked through the details to ensure that our existing programming, the large-scale programming for large band or orchestra events, can fit into the space, and that it's also got some flexibility. The other piece to that in the stage is that there is a partition built into the very front edge of the stage. So it can be cut off to work in isolation as a classroom. So there's flexibility built into that space too, which allows for all kinds of theater things to be happening even while lunch is going on. So that helps a lot in that area. We also have right-sized rooms for choir band and orchestra, which includes our new standard for instrument storage to maintain our assets in those spaces. And then a really cool shared practice room facility that you see sort of dotted around the orchestra and band rooms. And one of the things that's important here is that all of this input went into the front end of this, and then after the initial design came back and we had done a ton of work on it, we then took that to the users and said, okay, what do you think of this? And those teachers came back and said, okay, so here's kind of what would help us. So there's been an incredible collaboration on this to make sure that what we have is going to work the way we think it's going to work, and that it's going to be obviously in the best interest of kids in that space. Of course, the enhanced theater classroom is going to feel a little bit like a black box theater to some degree. It's not on the scale of what would be a large black box theater, but it will have the flexibility for lighting, the ability for them to have small shows that they can put on, and there isn't anything that they would need to do for theater that they cannot do in that space. Obviously, then we add the piano lab as an extension of what we already have at Jones and Corey, and then a comprehensive dance classroom, which will look very much like the studio classrooms that we have just installed at the high schools with the sprungwood floor and the mirrors and bars. So a lot of different pieces here. I do want to acknowledge again the great work that Stantec has done in this process. Where we are right now is very different than where we started, and it's very much a partnership that's happened. So certainly appreciate all of that work. And that's the fine arts.
President Mays, board members, Dr. Cavazos, good evening. As you've seen, what you've seen this evening is a schematic design. And so we've talked about this before, but in architecture, there are several distinct phases of design. And you start with planning, you start with trying to understand what your program is, what you intend to do in a space, how much space you need in order to do it, what kind of specialty spaces you need, the adjacencies of those spaces. All that is part of this first phase, this schematic design phase. And as you've heard described, a number of people have had a hand in this. What we are asking you all to consider this evening is the schematic design you've seen. If the board approves this, then we are effectively telling our architects, okay, we move to the next phase of design, which is design development. This is where they start to enter the more technical phase of architectural design, laying in the systems, the electrical systems, mechanical systems, what have you, and actually the structure itself. And then the next phase beyond that is construction documents, and then you move into bidding and then construction phase. So for your consideration this evening, we have presented this schematic design. If you all approve it, they will move forward to the next phase of design. This is part of the 2019 bond proposition. Several months ago, a number of months ago, the board declared the method of procurement for this project, as we're required to do by state law. And we recommended the board approve construction manager at risk for this project. Typically what you do is you hire your architect starts, and they start their initial design work, then you bring a construction manager on board to coordinate with that architect and help in some of the planning, the phasing, the scheduling, the sequencing, the materials that are used in the construction documents, and that's where you intend to gain some efficiencies. So we plan to issue the RFQ for construction manager at risk next week, probably early next week, with the anticipation that we would come back to the board, I believe in November, with a recommendation for that construction manager at risk. So as you've heard described, the first class of students in this program would begin at Gunn in August of 2021. So we're trying to be prepared so that when a bond package passes, if the bond package passes, we're ready to move forward with the project at that time very promptly. So with that, we will all be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mrs. Powell, and thank you for all those that were part of this presentation. Once again, this is a discussion action item, so at this time, are there any questions from my colleagues? Mr. Hogg?
Thank you, President Mays. Ms. Powell, Dr. Jansen, Mr. Horn, Dr. Wirtz, and all Stantec, thank you for all this. In my 12 years now on this board, I've learned this is the time to speak now about design or forever hold your peace, because architects get mad if you change. And Ms. Powell gets even more mad because that changes budgets and things like that. So I have to say, from initial first review, it's a really nice design. I really appreciate the design. I've learned it's speak now if you don't like it, because they can change at this point. But I do appreciate design. I do just have a couple of questions. What's this take the capacity of this school to? I didn't hear any discussion about capacity.
This is, I believe it is 1,450, 1,450, is that right? Yeah.
Okay.
And what we plan for there are, the academy program will have 3 grades, grades 6 through 8. The traditional junior high program would remain 7 and 8. And so we based this capacity on the anticipated long-range enrollment forecast for Gunn, the traditional Gunn, along with the anticipated matriculation of kids out of Jones and Corey, and allowed for even some growth in those programs, because if we move sixth grade to Gunn, then we'll maybe be able to serve some additional kids at Corey and Jones.
And I think that's a good point that you made, because this will still be zoned for Gunn students that live in that area, not just Academy. So it'll be a renovation for all. And with that, Dr. Cavazos and I were talking a little earlier of, and I don't think the decision needs to be made, but I'd ask staff to think about it. You know, should this be called Fine Arts Dual Language Academy Gunn Junior, or should it be called Gunn Junior High with that school within a school? I don't know the answer to that yet. My first thought was Fine Arts Dual Language, and then I was like, well, what we've done at Martin, what we've done at others, but with elementaries we've changed, so I think there's some change. So I would ask staff and marketing and anyone else to think through what it's officially called, because that is something we still can decide. I appreciate the comments of Stan Tech on, one of my biggest concern was a view on Fielder. What was happening along Fielder Road. As you drive along Fielder, this is a very heavily trafficked area that a lot of people see AISD from that front. So I'm still a little, I don't want to say underwhelmed, but I only saw one view. So I understand that. You know, I started thinking, what's the signage? What's the metal art? Can you expand that going out? Because now that's a grass area. Is that like a patio area for more of the students to come out there? Do you need metal fencing along that front side to expand that area to get that? I'm a little concerned still about what that view on Fielder looks like from that piece. I assume this involves, and I know we're not to that photo stage yet, but pretty much LED retrofitting almost the entire building to make it, you know, we've kind of decided we don't want LEED certified, it's not worth the extra money, but we want those benefits of light coming in.
We
all
try
LED.
to design to those standards, but without seeking.
Paying the certification.
Yeah.
I fully agree with that. Let me ask a question that I didn't hear come up. What aspects were taken into account for safety? As we renovate and totally change a school for its front design, what are we taking into account in the design to increase the safety factor to protect
Let
the school?
the architects, I think, speak to that, but we have considered that, and I think as they're even coming, the fact that are closing in and connecting those two
I
separate.
love that. Anyone who's been to Gunn, or
Gain.
the problem y'all gonna face is now everyone at Shack's gonna say, enclose my area at Shack. So I love, it makes total sense to have it enclosed in. I love that, and I know that enhances.
So that's a great question. Thank you for bringing it up. I think the security is something that we keep in mind, and you know, sometimes there is a you know, an opportunity to say that the openness is less safe, and we know by you know, from recommendations from the Texas Center for School Safety and other sources that the visibility is important. And so what we've done specifically in this campus is it has secure vestibules, not only in the main entry, but as we showed you on the piece below, that still has a vestibule that can be protected. Also, we've reduced the number of entrances to those that are vital for safety, right? So obviously we need to meet egress. If there's a fire, people need to get out. So we have been very strategic about the way that we provide access to the building. So as few doors as possible, and those doors that are there are doors that are set up in a way that there's passive supervision. They're not in a corner where nobody's seeing what's happening. Somebody can be trying to pry them open. So we've been very vocal about that, making sure that happens. Another aspect that we've done that is important is that we've compartmentalized the building so that in the event of you know, of lockdown, the school breaks down into different zones, and that you know, confines somebody that shouldn't be there to a specific area. So if we made sure that's an aspect of the building that also helps after our events, right? So that way you can use the gallery without having some people go throughout the whole school. So we've made sure that feature is available in the
So with that, that's leading to my next question. Is that from the gallery to the north? So the gallery, the dining, stage and the gymnasiums, those can all be blocked off from the rest of the school? Am I understanding that correctly?
So let me, this is a good slide. I'll use the mouse. So we close, the first place we close the campus is here. So athletics, it's its own area, right? So that can be closed off to where you can have events there and there's no need to access this way. The next place we close off the building is right here. So, oh, sorry. I can solve that. There we go. Now, laser pointer. We can see it, right?
There we go.
There we go. All right. So first place we can close that is right there. So athletics becomes its own area. You hold,
basketball games on the weekend.
Game and nobody comes into the campus. So that's one place. The other place is right here. So the idea is that whether you have an opening night for the gallery, nobody needs to go into the campus. They just go. They have access to the gallery and to the media center. So a lot of discussion we had about, well, maybe the media center needs to be closed off, but we thought it was such a feature to the building and it was such an asset for it to be open for regular for regular use for the students that it was worth keeping it open for that gallery night. So that's one place where we compartmentalize. The other areas that we're exploring, we're not quite showing that, is compartmentalizing here. So so whether and these would be specifically for safety, right? So the building would close here so that if somebody made it into the building, through these doors into the building, they really couldn't go beyond. And because the storm shelter is this portion right here, there's already a set of doors there that break it up into another. So those are some of the features that we have.
I think Dr. C wants to add.
Just the obvious, again, to point out, probably one of the biggest safety changes is moving the traffic and the student population away from Fielder to the new front of the building. That's probably one of the biggest concerns right now, even now with a small junior high, that there's so much traffic on that Fielder Road and kids trying to access, parents parking and all that. So that's a big feature in safety as well. I know it's obvious, but
no, and Dr. Vassos, when I say safety, I mean traffic. I mean child abductions of entrance and exits from multiple doors, all the different types of things that fit there. So that's all the questions I have. I'll listen to Mike. One last question: that make the media center, or not the media center, the Fab Lab, is that kind of like a maker lab? Is that what we're talking about there?
Maker space, maker lab. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Wow. As a parent who grew up with kids going through the sister school at Shack, quite a transformation. And I gotta say, when I was reading through my packet this weekend and I saw swamp, I'm like, that normally doesn't have positive attributes, but now I get it, and it's brilliant. And so thanks for the inspiration on that. I'm liking everything I see, but also as a longtime Dad's Club member who doesn't fondly remember having to get our traditional elementary cafetoriums set up for events and having to take all those lunch tables and find some place to stick them. Has there been any thought of when you need to transform that cafeteria into a performance, where you store all those tables, and is that going to be easy to do? Yeah, hold on.
Can I say something to that too, but just before you start? Oh, thank you. Excuse me, just a minute. Okay. I looked at those little tables with the round chairs and whatever, and if any of you've been to Corey, where Dr. Varnell was principal, he came up with a great solution to that furniture issue that you just brought up, and it's a whole new design for cafeteria tables. So I don't know if he could describe them. I don't know that I could describe them, but have you heard about those?
Yeah, so we had the great opportunity to work on both Corey and Jones, and so those tables there, if I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, the chairs are not attached to the tables, right? It's freestanding chairs and folding tables.
No.
Is that
No.
not a board?
No.
Oh, the bench tables. Yeah, we have those.
Bench table.
So yeah, those work great. Those sort of to set up to set up a performance. You don't move the tables away. You just sort of change the setup. And those are the type that we're showing now. We are exploring whether whether for this venue, and it'll be a conversation, as they will have further on with the staff and the principal and the community, is whether this school has those types of tables. If the performance is something that's a little bit more, that wants to feel more like a performance space, we've also offered having stacking tables that are around regular, stacking chairs that are around regular tables, so you just move the tables away. Regardless of the scenario, I know the dot, can you guys see the dot? I can't see the dot. Well, anyways, so dining room there, there's a restroom in the dining room, and then below it is a storage room for tables. Our job is to first land on what the furniture is going to be in that space, and then we'll create a stacking plan to see if they fit, right? If they don't fit, then we have to fix it. But that's basically the strategy.
Okay, so staying on the cafetorium, so the stage you said was as big as Arlington High, bigger than Arlington.
Wider, or a little bit
okay,
less deep.
All right, so when I looked at this, it wasn't clear, and so that was a big concern. And then a huge new kitchen wing. So what again is the difference in square footage of kind of the new dining and the difference on the kitchen space as well?
So dining grew. I'm remembering numbers out of my head. So it's somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000 square feet, but basically it grew by about 50%. So it got a whole lot larger. And the best way for me to describe that is if I show you this diagram. So what dining was, you see that little area that's dining there, that's basically below the lockers. We took over all the way to the existing school. So as we filled in that breezeway between the two buildings, that we added that chunk to dining. So it got substantially bigger, and we also grew the there you go. We also grew the kitchen as well to make sure that it could accommodate that growing student body.
Okay, so great. Looking forward to it. My concerns of having an old, when I first looked at this without context, it looked like we were getting the standard cafetorium, and I thought, no, even though we have the performing arts complex, these students need a more professional venue, and I think you guys hit the sweet spot right in between.
Well, and I think, I would mention that Dr. Anderson was sort of key in this. Him and his staff spent a good afternoon taping out in the floor what they would need as far as a stage to accommodate their performances, and that was key for us to make sure that we got it right.
So can we go to the media center? It looks like it's about the same. It looks smaller than the library space that's there now, but when you look at it on the diagram, when you look at this view, it looks a lot smaller than the library space they have now. But when you look at it on paper, it looks about the same size. Is that correct?
It's actually larger. Part of what makes it deceiving in this view is that it's so much taller than the current space, even though the current space is actually really tall. This is slightly taller because not only is the ceiling higher, but we're digging down below. And so it's a tall space. We have more square footage altogether. I mean, if we look at the floor plan, you can see that was the old library. Right. This is the new library. It
looks a little thinner, deeper.
Thinner, deeper, and the thing that the old library had is that it had the beginnings of a makerspace, and it was in the library. So now we have that second floor that is also where we took the makerspace and provided about 2,000 square feet up there for that.
My only concern, and my colleague, Ms. Walton, will attest, being a former librarian, is our librarians at all of our campuses, and I think even at the junior high, do a lot of teaching in the library.
Yeah.
And my concern is noise, like if they're trying to do instruction. And there's also a lot of testing that was done at the library. I don't know if that's going to be the case going forward with this. So my concern is providing that as privacy in an open concept like this for those kind of testing and traditional instruction that actually occur in the library.
So that was a huge conversation for us. We had the current librarian in that campus in our user meetings, and she provided feedback. She provided that same feedback. And as we talked about what the goal of this library to be, not just a place for where certainly instruction happens, but a place that is more inviting to students where they come and do after hours activities. This was a space. There was a balance there that they'd like to read.
I was just gonna say, instructionally, the spaces are becoming more and more fluid. If you think about some of the other buildings we have in the district, there are actually intentional breakout spaces for kids to engage in instruction where the walls are actually gone. It's pretty much a very open space. You'll notice that at like Patrick and many other places. If you go to Corey and Jones Elementary, their libraries are completely open. And you'd be surprised how quickly kids adapt to that kind of environment, and teaching still occurs with the librarian in those environments too. In situations where secure testing has to occur, we would just make sure those spaces are available. But the library functionality of both those two sites is still very, very much intact. Yeah.
Okay, don't go anywhere, Dr. Wertz. So, and this is mainly, I'm kind of new, so I don't think I was involved on the decision to move sixth grade for the academy there, but I think it's a brilliant strategy.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you want to add on that. Okay. On the biggest benefit I see is I know we are still losing some of our students who want to go into performing arts. When they're in fifth grade, they end up going to neighboring districts that offer this type of program for 6th through 12th. And I think this gives us, puts us now at an equal playing field to those other districts. So kudos, but from a pedagogical standpoint, I don't know, I'm sure that had more influence on the decision than being competitive to our neighboring districts.
We actually thought about it from a multifaceted perspective.
Yeah.
We thought, what kind of experience can students have in 6th grade if we move them that would be different than what they would have if we kept them at Corey? And in essence, there are some advantages, especially in the fine arts, when you move to an academy, a situation where they have a structured schedule that's similar to a middle school, because kids get extended time in those courses that you don't have available to you in the elementary hours. And so in terms of designing the space, that all was part of our discussion, which is if you have kids that are trying to become highly proficient in a craft, how do you design a space that makes that possible? And then how do you build an instructional program schedule that would actually maximize that space? And we found that if we actually move students to 6th grade there, we would accomplish that. The other thing about it too, you alluded to, is the fact that it's a very, very it's a competitive program down in the elementary ranks in terms of admission. Lots of people want to get in. I mentioned at the beginning, we had 476 applications. And that's way more applications than we have seats for. And so what this will allow us to do is almost have a win-win situation. Academy students will have an opportunity to continue to enhance their skills in an environment where a schedule allows that. And it makes space available for us to admit more students into the pipeline in the younger grades who are desperately wanting to get in.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Dr. Wertz. And I'll just wrap up by saying I echo the comments from my colleague, Mr. Hogg, on the security. It looks like that was well thought out. Beyond my expectations of the kind of security that we could provide, knowing the way the campuses are now. So again, kudos on that. And then I will also echo Mr. Hogg in that we do have a lot of traffic on Fielder, and that is great advertising right there. And whatever we can do to dress up and make and brand this program and convey all the great things we're doing in AISD to all that traffic driving by, all the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Ms. Walton?
Would you hit, I'm sorry. Thank you, President Mays. This is probably Dr. Wertz also. In the Fab Lab, will there be a dedicated teacher or instructor or someone running the program, or how does that work?
That's a good question. We're not that far into whether we're gonna have like a staff manager in there right now. Right now, for example, in the STEM labs, we do have a manager in the lab, but it's primarily the instructional process is ran by a teacher. When you think about a Fab Lab, there are components like Dr. Anderson spoke to that could be part of the fine arts process in terms of art and things. But in terms of like the academic program, the way I could allude to it is in the active learning cycle, when kids get to the demonstrate phase and they're actually demonstrating their knowledge of or generating a product that demonstrates their knowledge from the concepts learned, they could leverage the Fab Lab to actually construct those things. So it's a multi-purposed kind of space where you could access the materials to do fine arts things, but you could also leverage it to demonstrate your learning in an academic environment where the classroom teacher would actually be in the space with them. So we haven't gotten to a place where we have decided specifically whether you need a manager or not. We do know that we intend the space to be used by both the fine arts portion of the program as well as the academic dual language portion of the program. Yeah.
Right. Well, I would just, my 2 cents worth is with 6th graders and expensive equipment to do these high-tech things, there's going to be need to be supervision.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Let's see, my next question. I'm bouncing around. Where is the art courtyard? I just missed that completely. Which side of the building?
So, not great image to show it, but that's the first one that came up. Oh, there you go.
So it is on the fielder side.
It's on the fielder side. It is a courtyard that's currently.
Yeah, it's just kind of recessed in.
It's recessed in. There's really nice trees already there. So we're taking advantage of that to create a space for these 4 classrooms to have access to it.
Okay, stay with me. If there's a concert in the dining concert stage area, how do parents and people coming to that concert in the evening access the building?
So it's still going to be that main entry that we're creating off of the site. So it would be back here, right? So most of the parking is going to happen here.
Yeah, okay, so they would just come in the main door?
Right, main door, and the rest of the campus is closed off, and you have access to the cafeteria right there.
And through the gallery, okay.
Right.
That makes sense. Let's see. On the library, you're digging down and it shows several different levels.
Yes, ma'am.
How do we guarantee ADA accessibility?
So there is access. The reason we're digging down is because the gym at Gunn is already 8 foot down. So we're making up the difference. So the site is already dropping.
Yeah.
That's
fine. I just want to know how you get down there.
So even though it looks from that perspective I showed you that you're getting down, right? Because if you see this image, you're walking up to the entrance. What's behind you is the grade. The site is dropping. So when you walk on the opposite direction of the camera here, you're on at the level of the sidewalk because the site is dropping. That's sort of, we're using that advantage of the changing topography. Oh, the inside is okay, yeah. Yep. Upper level.
Yeah, I've got people in for the concert. I've got that answered. Yeah. Now I'm trying to figure out how kids get down 10 flights of steps.
So there is
10 steps to get into this area.
There is a double-sided elevator that's the main elevator to the campus. That's located, and I'm trying to do the zoom thing here. It's located right here. So this elevator takes you from I can't see
I don't see it.
Well, so that where it says view 1 right there, that little X right above it is the elevator. Double-sided, so that gets you the accessible access.
Okay, that's a good placement for that. And then how is so the library is really I know y'all said you wanted it to be wide open, but again, sixth graders, seventh graders, I'm having a hard time wrapping myself around the fact that, I mean, you can kind of restrict elementary kids because, you know, there are a lot of people around, parents and so forth, but I am concerned, especially if it's a media center, will there be computers and that sort of thing in there too?
There are computer stations there, but one of the things that we did as we had the discussion about both testing and both noise issue, we created on the second floor a computer lab that wasn't originally in the program to serve some of those functions. So the specialized computers are in that place. It can also be used as a place for instruction should the noise level not be appropriate in the library. So that was sort of, as we talked about the library being open and something that was important, this was sort of a way to solve the need for another space that could be guaranteed to be quiet when it was necessary.
Okay, I'm just worried about equipment walking off. As a former librarian, you know, I was responsible,
Right.
you know, for that inventory. So there will be computers in the library. Is that correct, or did I miss that?
Currently, the current library has computers there. We have the computer labs to have most of the computers in that location. There would at least be computers to check out equipment.
Right.
We're not at that level of detail yet to know whether there is computer banks, for example.
Well, and there'd have to be some for, accessing different databases
Right.
and,
Yes,
and card catalog and, you know, online card catalog and so forth. So, I think y'all might want to think about the security of this area in some way, and I don't think it's impossible. My last question, I believe, is lighting. I would think if there's going to be instruction in that library, there's going to be some sort of a smart board or whatever the next generation of that type of technology is going to be, which requires kind of a darkened area.
Yeah, so the teaching area is back here where that red dot is, and you see kind of that short projector. We put it back at the back end of the library, both for noise and also because you're going to have the ability to black out or
Okay.
Bring shades down on those windows.
Like at Peach Elementary. Okay,
Yep.
gotcha. Okie dokie. I think that was all of my questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate all that information.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Mays. I have a series of questions, but I think some of them might go away if I understood a little bit better the schematic design that I'm looking at. So if we can go to the slides that have the floor plan level 1 and level 2.
Okay. So level 1.
So if you got level 1, you go to the next slide, there's level 2.
Yep. Level 2, yep.
Okay, can you go back like 3 slides to the one that has the highlighted new construction?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can do that. I lost my mouse here. Let's see. Maybe I can't do that. Let's see. I don't think I have control of this screen, at least the mouse part. All right, I can do that now. It's this direction, and go slide by slide.
That one.
Yep.
So that to me looks like a different design than what's on, and I think these are in different orders in the slide deck that I have here. That's a different design. So which ones are we doing?
The color one. So this option was, as Dr. Anderson was saying, we came up with a first option. We brought it to the leadership group. We worked on it from that feedback. And then we brought it to the user group. We worked on to that feedback. So that is very, very early on, and really that slide was there to illustrate just the amount of addition, but the actual design is this light.
Okay, all right, thank you. So that's really helpful. So going on the topic of school safety, you mentioned earlier that the left side of the screen there is going to be the designated part of the building that's a storm shelter. Did I hear you right?
Yes.
So how's that going to work? Would everybody go down to that part of the building during a storm and then the doors would close off?
Yes. I can't do the little pointy thing anymore, but basically you see a set of doors. I'm just gonna go point over there. Right here. So everything from that side over, right there, is the storm shelter and in the first floor. And it's the size it is because it's accounting for the entire capacity of the campus. But yeah, the idea is that in a storm event, everybody would move to that space.
Okay, because on the screen, it doesn't actually look that large, so I was just making sure that seems like a lot of kids to put in that spot. So, speaking of the number of kids, so Ms. Powell said that the capacity of the building would be about 1,450 students. What do we know, and this might be a question more for Dr. Wirtz or Ms. Powell, what's the anticipated enrollment once the Fine Arts Dual Language program is there, plus the existing Gunn students?
Diego was very instrumental in helping us with that. It's 1358, 1360, I think, and we wound up rounding to the 1450 for planning purposes to give us just a little bit of extra capacity.
Okay. Okay, so it's going to be pretty full up when they get there. Okay, going back to school safety, I noticed on this design here, so you mentioned that if you go to the left side of the building, that those entrances will, they're not going to be used regularly. They're going to be able to be closed off, and we've got sight lines to them and everything else. But what about these stairwells? Is it possible to access those two stairwells once you get inside one of those doors?
To access these two stairwells?
Yeah.
Yeah, so these stairwells are, exterior to the building, and yes, you can once you're in them, you can access both floors. There is sort of another set of doors right here that sort of keeps you from the rest of the building, but these are for egress. They're also designed in such a way that so that from the interior, so this area that looks like a wider corridor, it's actually a flexible area. It's an extension of the classroom. So there's activity there, so you can see those doors, and the same from the outside. Those corners are glassy, so they're pretty prominent.
Okay, so students would be using those stairwells though to access the second floor.
To go up and down, yes.
Okay, because the only concern I have with that is I remember with the Stoneman Douglas incident in Florida that the shooter was able to access multiple floors of the building because the stairwells were immediately adjacent to the entrance points. So that's if that works, that's great. That was something that came to mind, and so I want to make sure that that's not a scenario that could play out.
It is a challenge. It's one of those where for egress, code requires that those doors be there, right? So in the event of a fire from the second floor, you don't want to kind of transverse the building. As you come down the stairs, you want to be able to head out. So that's why they're there. I think the benefit here or the idea would be is that those doors are for egress only. So they would be locked from the outside. I mean, they could be what we call tertiary doors where they don't have any hardware outside. So really it's the only way to use them is from the inside of the building. So those are the discussions we're gonna have as we sort of keep developing the safety and security aspect of the plans.
Okay, and then I had a question on if we look at the level 2 design, how many students do we anticipate? We've got a couple of different parts of this floor, but there's really only one way to access all of the classrooms in on the left side of the screen.
Yeah, you really kind of want this a little corridor here, right?
Yeah.
We wanted it too. The challenge there was, to your question, there's so each one of those little boxes has about 25 students. And let's see, so we got 100, 200, so about 320, 340 students on this side, on this floor of the building. Now, the idea is that if I'm in this classroom and I'm going to dining, I would probably not do that. I would probably go down these stairs and then take the straight shot in this direction. But yes, one of the challenges is we want it to be as efficient as possible and be good stewards of your resources. And so the existing band rooms and choir rooms are in this area, so they're more than one story. They're a story and a half, so we can't put anything on top, because otherwise I would have to take you up the stairs and down the stairs to cross over. So that's why circulation-wise, it is a little different to have just the one connection to that side.
Okay. Can we look at the slide with that shows the traffic flow?
Yes. Maybe. It's working on it. Oops. Did that break over there? Wait. Okay. All right. It's coming. I think I'm fighting for the mouse with somebody. Sorry about that. Thinking about it. Oh,
It's okay. I can just ask. So
Yeah,
have we done any sort of initial studies on what we anticipate the increase in traffic flow through that neighborhood will be? Because I know we're worried about the traffic on Fielder, and the goal with the design was to pull traffic off of Fielder, but it looks like it's doing that in part by anticipating increased traffic flow on Paisley and on Canongate to some extent. Do we have any sort of projection on that?
So we didn't run a traffic study per se, but our calculations are based on, we're basically doubling the capacity of the current campus. And so part of our goal was to, the current drop-off is on Fielder. So it was to take the traffic out of that. So we know that there'll be about double the amount of traffic that there's there. I don't know that I have the information to tell you how many cars that would be, but we did make a lot of effort to make sure that all of this, well, you can't see that, but that the stacking will work to where all of this would serve for drop-off. And I think we're showing the drop-off where this is a double lane, right? So you have two sets of cars on both sides. So we're hoping by doing that we're taking most of the traffic on campus, as Jonathan was saying. We don't know at this point that that's going to be all of the traffic, but it's definitely going to be much improved.
Okay. Can you show the slide showing from the Fielder Street view or the Fielder Road view?
Yes.
So right now, if you were to, in my mind, if I'm looking at this angle at Gunn, it's almost like it's raised up off of Fielder. Is the goal going to be that we're going to level that out, or is this just that raised element is going to remain?
So we're keeping the interior elevation of the building, since we're connecting inside of the building, we're keeping that floor level the same. So the building is raised from Fielder, actually quite a bit. So it is going to feel still like it's higher. I think going back to the board's comments about sort of this view. One of the things that we're not showing, that this view doesn't show really well, is that those corners are glassy. You can see into the dining, but to your original question, the building is a little bit higher than the rest of the building.
Okay, so it's not necessarily going to be the case that somebody's going to be walking, at street level is going to be even with the building shown here. Okay.
No, and part of the idea is that we create sort of that territoriality for the building in a sense for school safety, that the landscape would sort of create that perimeter. So instead of needing a gate or needing a fence on this side, it's really the landscape that's helping that. And one of the advantages that we have on this side is that we have a lot of mature trees that are already doing a lot of that. There is some side walls that we think we're going to be able to save, and by side walls I mean just little walls that are both for decoration and design, but also create sort of that soft boundary to the campus.
Okay. And what I think is my last question, can you show the slide that's looking into the library?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, from the outside. I
Oh,
apologize.
yes. I think it's.
So I really like this design, and it incorporates the glass elements and the natural lighting really well, and we've seen this at some of our newer campuses, and I particularly really like it. But what I've heard expressed by some parents and some teachers, and I don't know if there's any way to address this, or maybe you have, is some people feel like in this day and age that that's a double-edged sword because you're getting the natural lighting in, but it's also exposure to some extent because you can have people come up and they have direct line of sight to students in their classroom or in a learning space. Is there anything anticipated to be done to maybe, without reducing the amount of natural light and that benefit to hardening those windows in some way to make them to where they're not, you can still see in, but somebody can't do something by having that line of sight?
I think that's part of the discussions we're going to have as we develop the strategy as what the what the final solution for design would be as far as around school safety. We do see that we using strategic locations of hardened glass so that there is a level of protection there, and that's something that we're definitely ready to explore.
Okay, that's good to hear. I mean, I think it's a ridiculous, fact of life that we have to have this discussion, but I have heard some parents at some of our newer campuses that enjoy these features have, or on the whole, they like it, but it is something that's cropped up from time to time, so I just wanted to ask.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. I can't see my screen now to turn someone on. Mr. Wilbanks.
Yeah, I just have a quick question and related to Mr. Chapa's questions on the stairwell access. If you could put up the slide, well, one of the first floor slides. In the main gallery area, there's two sets of stairs, one over by the dining and one kind of over by the library.
Yep.
If
That one.
if guests were coming in for a performance at night, is there a way to lock those off so that
Yes.
siblings won't randomly travel up and have access to a broad swath of the second floor?
So that's that's also part of where our discussion goes next. So in the second floor, we could create a way for either on the first floor or the second floor, sort of encircling those stairs so that they're close off. We're not showing that yet, because part of our discussion is whether maybe that after-hour use includes the Fab Lab. So maybe we're closing the campus. You can't see that. I can, but you can't. So I'll go point again. So whether we close at the stairs or whether we close right here where you see the edge of that white box, so that in after-hour use, should you want to do that, the Fab Lab would be accessible to your students. So let's say that you have a robotics lab or something like that. So I think we've done a lot of progress in SD to make sure that we have enough detail to move forward, and we're looking forward to having those conversations a little bit more now that Matt is on board as principal to make sure that whatever the solution is on security not only addresses security and safety needs, but also the way the campus is going to operate.
All right, thanks, Diego.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Mays. Ms. Powell, I don't know why you even bother to keep coming up because I'm
I
asking
wondered
Diego
that
a
myself.
question.
Diego. And by the way, Diego has done a lot of this. Diego is a brand new dad, and so he hasn't had a lot of sleep recently.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Well, I really appreciate all of the information. The design is spectacular. I'm very excited to see our students matriculate up into this facility. Just two questions. With regard to the placement of the orchestra space to the cafetorium or stage area, it seems like it's kind of removed. Was there thought about that, putting it closer? Or?
there was a little bit of discussion there. A lot of it was that we were reusing the existing high volume spaces, right? But even in that discussion, we had the option of using dance and drama where those are located. But the benefit of the location where they are is that when we talked to the teachers, they thought that although access to the stage was important, and they expressed that, the day-to-day collaboration between choir, orchestra, and band, having those three large spaces together was really important. And I think Dr. Anderson spoke to this. One of the efficiencies of keeping them together was that we could create those practice rooms, sprinkle them in that area, and they're shared. So instead of having program-specific practice rooms, we're sharing them and creating efficiency there, hoping that there's going to be more availability for students to go practice. So all that to say that we were sort of reusing these spaces and sort of so having those three together seemed more important to the teachers than being right next to the stage. And one of the other positives of this location that I think is not just for the fine arts, but also for the rest of the arts, is that you see that those arts are central to the campus, like literally they're smack in the middle. And that was by design because we wanted to make sure that those students, as they move through the campus, whether they go into art or not, they're experiencing the arts every day as they move from their classroom to dining. This campus feels different and the experience is different, and it's sort of setting that expectation for the students.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. The final question, you'd probably have to go to the slide that has the exterior view with the field.
Field there? Yep.
And the parking.
Oh, okay, yep.
Yeah, that's good. So from a student safety perspective, with all of the drop-off and pickup occurring between the school and the field now, can you show me how the students are safely getting to and from that field?
That was a discussion that we had, especially because one of the things that that you'll notice is that there's this little white box there that
the field house.
That's the field house. That's the weight room. So we're creating a walkway in between those two areas. To be completely honest, it's not ideal to have a drive between your field and your school. It is a challenge that as we looked at solving the traffic challenge, both the principal at the time, the teachers, and the coaches felt like that was something that they could manage, that they could make sure that their students, as they're moving from the locker rooms to the fields, they could manage that challenge. But it is definitely a challenge.
Okay, yeah, and I know from my experience at Shack as a parent, it wasn't like that, but it was on the other side, the students crossing from the building to get towards Field to Road.
Yep.
And it was a very concerted effort of a lot of people as far as administrators, teachers, not just to keep the students in control because they pretty much got it, but the parents picking up. They were they're heavy on traffic control, and this is a larger volume of kids that are going to be going out to those fields.
So one of the things that we did discuss and we created the option for is that even though there's a connection right here, the idea is that buses would drop off on this area, turn around. Well, I'm drawing it the wrong way, but buses come in here, drop off right here, and leave the campus. Parents, the idea is they can either go this way, which is one option, but the other option is the parents come around and leave the side over there.
Okay.
So even though we have this for a fire loop around the building, right, so that the fire service can access the building, there is a possibility and a further discussion for us to have whether there is a manual gate or something there so that there's really no
I think that'd
through
be
traffic
great.
through that area.
Cone it off or something so the parents have to go that way, the buses that way. That solves it, I think. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm excited to see this progress. Thank you to you guys for your architectural excellence, and to the staff from an academic standpoint and an art standpoint. This is going to be, I think, quite the envy to other districts that are already envious of our fine arts dual language elementary. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Ms. Walton?
Thank you, Ms. Mays. My questions are also for Diego, I'm sorry.
Maybe I just stay up here.
Just stay put. Going off of some of the comments from Dr. Reich, doing this new loop around and the new parking lot and all of this groundwork, I know that's probably not the technical term, but anyway, is there an opportunity here for us to correct some of the the rainwater drainage off of the property onto Canongate?
Yes, so, part of this shaded area you see, right here, is expanding the retention pond that would handle a lot of the rainwater into the campus. And a lot of this rework is keeping that in mind, because that was an issue that we heard from the principal to the teachers, and we know that's a known challenge.
Great. I was fixing to say, yeah, that's the real swamp. But we want it there and not in somebody's, garage. The only other question I have is I'm looking at the slide right before this one. And at the very top of that yellow part next to the Fab Lab, there's a little rectangle there on the edge that says open to below.
Yep.
Now explain that, why we have something open to below from a Fab Lab.
So it's it's not a railing. It's much like I broke it again. It's much like the situation we have. Trying to get to that right rendering here. It's glassed all to completion, so it's glass floor to ceiling. You're able to look into it.
Okay, it'll be like looking into the dance and the. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you. That's a very good idea to have glass there. Yes. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Just a reminder that this is a discussion action item, and I would highly entertain a motion at this time, if it's available. Ms. Fowler?
Thank you, President Mays. I make the motion that we consider the schematic design for the Gunn Junior High Academy of Fine Arts and Dual Language.
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. For a second? So we've got a motion made by Ms. Fowler, a second by Dr. Reich. Any other discussion? Okay, please vote. Okay, all present vote in the affirmative. Thank you very much. I would like just to make one very short thank you. I really do appreciate the fact that you've sat down and you've brought your knowledge for building onto this junior high, but that you still sat down and incorporated the things that are important for Arlington to make it specific, and for that special curriculum that's going to be offered, that y'all took the time to collaborate with the teachers and the people who are actually going to be using the spaces to make sure that the space is then developed around what they like to teach, instead of just putting space and just saying, here, go in this space and do this. Really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda. Mr. Chapa, apologize.
Thank you, President Mays. Could I have Ms. Benjamin please read back the motion as it was stated?
Yes.
Motion by Melody Fowler, second by Dr. Reich, to consider the schematic design for the Gunn Junior High Academy of Fine Arts.
Can we need to amend?
Need a new motion.
Then make a new motion. Ms. Fowler can make it.
Ms. Fowler, would you like to make a new motion?
I would, thank you. I make the motion to approve the consideration of the schematic design for the Gunn Junior High Academy of Fine Arts and Dual Language.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay. New motion made by Melody Fowler, second by the new guy, David Wilbanks. Any other discussion? At this time, please vote. Thank you. All present, vote in the affirmative. Okay, continuing on with our agenda. Next, we have any items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? Do we have any items to be withdrawn? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our items.
Yes, we have 5 bids on the agenda for your consideration this evening, and in all 5 cases, we are recommending the low bids and the bids that represent the best value to the district.
Thank you, Ms. Powell. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Motion by Mr. Hogg, second by Dr. Reich. Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. All present, vote in the affirmative. Thank you. Next on the agenda is discussion item, accountability update. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mason. This evening, we'd like to bring an update to our accountability ratings and performance. I will share that there will be multiple opportunities as we bring the district improvement plan goals, campus goals, to have more discussion about this. This is the complexity of the accountability system will also be explained and our performance, but there will be ongoing opportunities to provide input to this. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Wertz.
And I am happy to invite Diego back for questions, should you have them at the end of the presentation. So, thank you for having us, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos, to share with you tonight our accountability results for this 2018-19 school year. I want to start off first by just acknowledging all the efforts across the district who make these results possible for kids. One of the things that we know is it doesn't matter what label you give a school or a district, it's one label, and it really doesn't tell you the full story of the complete amount of effort that is actually taking place to help kids have a successful experience at school. But it is a moment to celebrate because it does articulate some things. And so I'm excited to be here tonight with some of my colleagues, Dr. Barlow and Dr. Brown, to talk specifically about some of our outcomes, the new accountability system, what it looks like and how we interact inside that system, and then also specifically some interventions and things we're putting in place to help schools who continue to need some support. So what I want to start off with is our district vision and mission, which is to be a leader in education, and to also empower and engage our students to become these responsible citizens, but specifically through relevant, innovative, and rigorous learning experiences. And you've heard me say this a lot, but it's true that we've actually had to ask ourselves specifically like what those things mean. If you have a goal, it's really important for us as a team to understand specifically what it is that we're trying to accomplish so we can put systems in place to help us to do that. Our goal in Arlington is that 100% of our students graduate exceptionally prepared. And so for us, we've had to really define what is an exceptionally prepared student, what are the academic skills that we need them to walk away knowing how to use, and specifically also what are the life-ready skills that you need to have as an individual in order to function in society in a productive way and access those other academic skills that you once had. To us, this goal is an equity goal. I think it's a unique goal. I suspect that if you scoured the goals across the state, maybe even parts of the country that boards were setting, you don't see the number 100% very often. And I think that speaks to your commitment to our students and our commitment to our students to make sure that all students, regardless of who they are and what their backgrounds are, that we believe they can actually cross the finish line exceptionally prepared for the life that they choose for themselves. There's a quote that says equity is the only acceptable goal. And so I think the articulation of a goal of 100% is that. It is articulating an idea that we believe equity and access is important. I wanted to highlight the relationship between design, implementation, and evaluation revision. When we go through the continuous improvement process and we work in our district, we work as a team to do these things. So you will, if you were to engage with the design side of the house, you would be talking to curriculum and instruction and teaching and learning division, everyone in specialized support services who design the supports and programs that are then implemented at each of the individual schools where the students exist. And then we also have a department that works to evaluate whether those processes are actually in fact happening or not. When we find that we're not reaching the goals that we intend to reach, we stop and look at the processes to try to understand specifically which part of the process is breaking down and do what we call a gap analysis between how it should function ideally versus what it's functioning like now. And if there is a gap, how do we begin to close that gap? In Arlington, we've asked ourselves specifically, if you want to create a meaningful, rich experience for students, what is it that teachers need to know and be able to do? And there was a moment in time where several years ago, we started asking ourselves if there are research-based practices that we know have a statistical effect size on student outcomes in the classroom. What are they, and how do we ensure that every teacher accesses them and has them in their tool belt to leverage in the classroom with students? And that was the birth of the active learning cycle. The active learning cycle is simply put 12 specific research-based practices that are placed in a specific cycle so that as students go through their learning experience, they have an opportunity to experience that learning in a specific way, and it also is something that is guaranteed and viable across the district. So if you're in an Algebra 1 class sitting at Sam Houston, or you're in an Algebra 1 class sitting at Bowie High School, you can have confidence as a student that your instruction has a certain level of experience that you would get anywhere else. These are the 12 research-based best practices that are embedded in them. And the reason I say these 12 best practices, because regardless of which framework you implement, and you're going to hear me come back in the fall to talk specifically around literacy, it is the articulation of these best practices within that framework that make those things effective. And I think we're at a place in Texas, if we want to celebrate an accountability system, where some positive things have happened. While it's not always great, or you don't hear educators celebrating the idea of an A through F system, the one thing that is positive is the accountability system now at least is beginning to recognize that there is more to school than 5 tests at a high school that kids take one day out of the year. Now we are actually incorporating things like their certification exams that they take, their interest in military. There's lots of other components that make school experience school. And so if there is any positive to that, I think that's it. It's the fact that the accountability system is now beginning to start to represent those things. These are just some pictures of other kinds of programs that our students engage themselves in across our system. They prepared themselves, regardless of whether it's CTE or whether it's an academic, through the implementation of these best practices. And if you were to go over the CTC, where we have all of our CTE programs, they are implementing the active learning cycle where kids are demonstrating their knowledge of their content in a meaningful way that's relevant. I wanted to start off today by just sharing the good news. We have some celebrations. Last year at this time, we received a charge from the board about increasing to improve our student outcomes, and today we can stand before the board and say that our improvement has occurred. We're by no means at the end of the finish line. The goal is 100%, and until we get there, we're going to continue to strive. But here are some highlights that I wanted to share with you today. Graduation rates. Graduation rates have continually increased. We've had actually specific strategies and action plans in place to try and work on increasing graduation rates. You can see the numbers. Our 4-year and 5-year graduation rates have both increased across the district. We had 95% of all of our campuses meet standard in 2019 and earn a total of 99 distinctions. 2 of our IR campuses last year met standard and one earned one distinction each. 50% of campuses improved their rating, meaning going from one grade to another. Some campuses still improved. They just didn't necessarily improve from one grade to another, but there were still some areas of growth. And 19 campuses moved up a whole letter grade. And these are actual pretty good wins. As a district, we are at 86 this year. Last year we were at 78, so that's an 8-point increase, and you can see over time that change from a C to a B. And when we think about this rating of improvement, one of the things we try to do as a system is try to understand that growth in context of the rest of the world, meaning how is the rest of Texas doing? How well do other districts that look like us, how are they performing? Are we aligned with them? Are we outperforming? Are we underperforming? Just so we can get a sense of what it actually means. And so I thought I would highlight a couple of things for you tonight. Of the 44 school districts in Texas with 33,000 or more students, Arlington ISD outgained 36 of them. So when you think of how much growth occurred, 36 of those 44, we actually outgained them. We increased our statewide percentile rank by 13 points. So when you think about your percentile ranking, which Dr. Barlow will go into detail, 50 percentile ranking is like right there in the middle. Our goal is to always be in the upper quartile, so we're going to continue to strive towards that area. And this time across the state, we increased our percentile rank by 13 points. Statewide ranking is one thing, but the challenge around statewide ranking is, there are over 1,000 districts across the state. Some are as big as one of our high schools, some are smaller than one of our high schools, and some are much bigger than we are. So in order to really get a gauge about how well we're doing, we really try to compare ourselves to other districts that look like us. And the way that we do that is we look at the economically disadvantaged rates across those districts. So our Research and Accountability Department looks at districts that look like us, that are within 10 points above or below us about the number of students who are on free and reduced lunch. And the reason we use economically disadvantaged as one of our trigger points, or the way that we look at it, is because the research says that is the challenge when it comes to schools. When students show up to school and they are at an economically disadvantaged place, that is usually the reason why struggle happens. And it's not necessarily because they're not capable of learning. They are definitely capable of learning. It just means that they necessarily haven't been exposed to many experiences that more affluent students have been exposed to, which may cause delays in parts of learning that need us to put some supports in place. And so we want to compare how well we're meeting those student populations' needs across our district in comparison to other districts that look like us. In Arlington, in our comparison group, which is over 400 districts, I believe it's like 442 or 444, we increased our percentile rank by 21 points. So in the past, which Barlow will show you, we were in the 40s. Now we're in the 60s, in the 63rd percentile, I believe. In terms of college and career readiness, we have indicators that we are measured now by, which they say college, career, and military readiness, which are outside of state accountability. This year, we met every single one of those readiness indicators, which is a big win. And Dr. Barlow will be able to share the specifics of that when he breaks down the accountability system. But this is an opportunity to see how our kids are succeeding outside of just academics, and it does impact the way they're actually experiencing school. So what we're going to do now is there are two parts of the rest of the presentation we want to share with you in the community. The first is an articulation of our actual accountability system. What is the accountability system? How are these scores actually generated? It's kind of complex, as you all know. It's not as simple as you get a B. There are actually there's lots of complexity even for us as staff to really learn. So we're going to share with you how you actually land in an 86. What does the 86 actually mean? And then Dr. Brown is going to come behind Dr. Barlow, and share with you specifically the supports that are being put in place and strategies to support underperforming schools. So schools that continue to struggle can also have equitable access to programming support so their kids can be successful in the classroom. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Barlow.
Thank you. Good evening, President Mays, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. So I'm going to talk us through a little bit of the mechanics and then get to some of the results. I'll probably go a little bit faster on the mechanics this year than we did last year, just because it'll be a lot of review slides. Although what I will say is it is an extremely complicated system. Even this week, as we're looking at our data, we found some new rules that we weren't familiar with. They're just tiny rules everywhere, and some of them are printed in the manual, some of them aren't. You have to call TEA. We're on the phone with TEA constantly trying to figure out, hey, why did this calculation not come out like we thought it was going to? And then they say, oh, we got to do such and such, and so we rerun our algorithm, and it gets pretty messy. So we have these three main areas here. We're familiar with this. Domain 1 is the student achievement. Domain 2 has two parts. School progress with the Part A, student growth, and Part B, relative performance. And then that third part there is, our third domain is closing the gaps. As Dr. Wirtz indicated, we continually use data in our processes and do a continuous improvement process. There's many models out there, so I won't go into details of that, but the main idea there is that we use our data as we try to make changes with instruction and try to make changes with student outcomes and other parts of our system. We've gotten a little bit more sophisticated over the years where we're using both quantitative and qualitative data. In fact, I'll say we just added a qualitative analyst to our team in our research department, so we're really excited about that. But what we really want to do is look at things through both lenses. I usually look at quantitative data, with respect to kind of what's happening, look at, broad amounts of data, population data, sample data, and so forth, kind of what's happening, and then we use that qualitative data to dig a little bit deeper to figure out why it's happening. Seems like a good mixed methods approach. In that process, then we adjust as we can and try to make the most that we can on student impact. So let's get into the student achievement domain. This one here is the first piece, and basically it's the typical, did students pass or did they meet at some sort of level? Right now we have those 3 levels of achievement, which is the approaches level, the meets level, and the master's level. We'll get into the mechanics of that in just a little bit, but basically we're talking about did students perform at some sort of level on the assessment. We also add to that, or what has been added to that, is for the high schools and the districts, is that CCMR component, the career, college and readiness, college, career, and military readiness component, and then the graduation component. So if I'm looking at that STAR component, which is that top piece there, that would be basically in domain 1, just did you meet some sort of achievement level on the test? You'll notice that at elementary, middle schools, everything is still focused on STAR. When you get to the high schools and the districts, then you have the 3 breakdowns there where you have the STAR, CCMR, and graduation rate. Where STAR in that case is actually only 40% of the district and the high schools. We'll spend a lot of time on the CCMR, as Dr. Wirtz indicated earlier. But basically, won't go through the formula here. Basically, you're just going to add up all the students that were at each one of these achievement levels, and then divide by 3, and that's going to give you a raw score for your domain 1, and then that's converted into a scale score. So basically, student achievement is, did students meet some sort of, some level of achievement on the test? Not really talking about growth or anything yet. Then we get into that college career and military readiness component, which was that second part of the domain 1 for high schools and districts. And you'll see the areas listed there that are considered. I won't go through all of them, but basically if students had an AP, a 3 on an AP exam, or if they've met TSI criteria, they completed dual credit, associate's degree, an on-ramps course, you can see them listed there. The career readiness part, you have that coherent sequence of courses and CTE courses, certification exams, which we had a big focus on that this year, trying to make sure that we had identified all of our students in certification exams and given them every opportunity to pass those. They also have some new requirements or criteria with respect to students that are graduating in our special education program. And then lastly, that military readiness component. I will say out of all of these, the military readiness component is the one that's just really a little bit ambiguous there as far as how that's actually calculated or actually the data is collected. There's really no TEA guidance on how to collect those data, so it's kind of left up to the district to figure that out. So there again, with the CCMR component, basically you're just going to take all the students who achieve some or one of those, at least one of those CCMR components. They don't need all of them, they just need one of them. As long as they fall into one of those areas, then we get credit for them. And then you divide that by the number of graduates. So that gives you another component of that domain 1 score. And then the graduation rates, the typical process that we've looked at over the last several years with respect to 4-year graduation rate, 5-year graduation rate, and 6-year graduation rate. So that goes into domain 1. They'll pick the higher of the 3, which is typically your 5 or your 6-year, because you have a little more time to graduate students. But basically, you're picking a graduation rate there. So that goes back to kind of a quick summary there. Elementary and middle schools, you're basically looking at STAR, and then at the high schools and districts, you're looking at those 3 components, the STAR, CCMR, and the graduation rate. So that is domain 1. We'll kind of sum this up here when we get towards the end, but then we get into the school progress domain, which is basically 2 components. One is, did students make progress? And the other one is, how's your district or your campus doing with respect to other like districts or campuses? So those 2 components, then they'll take the higher of those 2 areas. But basically, we call that the school progress domain, domain 2. Again, they'll take the higher of Part A or Part B for either elementary, middle schools, high schools, or districts. That student growth component, we'll go into a little bit of detail on that, not much, but basically this is the chart that they use to calculate the student growth component. Won't go into the details on the chart, but basically if you kind of scan through that, you'll see that students have an opportunity to gain 0 points, 0 points, a half point, or 1 point, depending on where they fall on that grid. Basically, compared to what they did last year, did they go to this year? Did they meet some sort of achievement level? Where did they fall in the box? And basically, the thing to remember there is it's 0 points, a half point, or 1 point. We take all those students within the district, and then it's all students who, for whom we have 2 data points. If a student's missing a data point, they don't go into the calculation. Take all of those, add them up, and take the average of them, or total up all the points, and that gives you your student progress domain component. Do the same thing with our special education students. They have a little bit different chart, but it's basically the same concept. The relative performance is where we start comparing ourselves to districts or campuses that are like us. And this is where you may have heard some of the talk about the economic disadvantage and making sure that we've identified all of our economic disadvantage students, because that's the key factor that goes into this, this process for school progress domain. So I have a chart here. I'm hoping that that'll make a little bit of sense. It's a little bit of older chart, but I think it still applies. So the concept here is if you look off to the left and you're looking at that horizontal axis, that represents your economically disadvantaged students. And so you start from the left, you have 0% economic disadvantage, 10%, 20%, all the way up, all the way to the right there, and you get up to 90% or 100%. The left side of the chart, or the vertical line there, represents some of the some of the domain 1 components. So basically it's that domain 1 score, and you'll see that you have a 0, 10%, 20%, and so forth up the left side of the chart there. So the idea there is if I'm looking at the chart, and let's just take, let me go back through those. If you look at those bands there, you'll see there, I'm not sure if you can see it on the chart, but there's 4 bands that divide that up into 5 different areas. So the lowest chart there, I will actually see if I can use this laser pointer. Not that coordinated, but we'll see if this will work. So you see these lines coming across the chart here. There should be 4 of them. Anything below here would be considered an F. Anything up here would be considered an A. So the best way to look at this is that if I am, say, over here in 0% economically disadvantaged, and I scored somewhere in this area, so let's say that I'm that dot right there, that's a district, and I'm at, say, whatever that is, about 5% economic disadvantage, right there I would be an F with respect to that performance level. But if I kept that same performance level, and I just had more economically disadvantaged students, and I scrolled all the ways over here to the right, let's say that I had 90% economically disadvantaged students, then what do I turn into as far as my letter grade? I would actually turn from an F to an A. I didn't increase my student achievement any. All I did was I used the calculation for 90% economic disadvantage instead of 0% economically disadvantage. So that's kind of a visual of how that works, why that's so important with that, making sure we've identified all of our students properly in domain 2B. Basically, we've covered that. I'm going to kind of go through some of these that we've already covered. Closing the gaps. We used to look at this as this was kind of safeguard measures. You may remember those charts that we used to do under the old system that we called the safeguard measures. This is kind of like that, but much more intense. And basically, we're looking at different student groups, and we're making sure that we're providing equity amongst all those student groups. I do have a chart here. Let me see if I can get to it. Or a slide with the groups and then a chart. But basically you have student groups on the left side. Those are all the student groups that are considered, all students, African-American students, Hispanics. A lot of those we've considered in the past, but you'll notice there's a couple there at the bottom that are a little bit different. 2 of those being the current and former special ed students, and then the continuously enrolled and the non-continuously enrolled. And then on the right side are the actual areas that they're measured in. So you'll see academic achievement, growth in reading and math, 4-year federal graduation rate, college and career readiness, the student achievement domain score from the domain 1 STAR component only, and then the EL progress measure, or English language proficiency status. So I'm going to stop here on this chart for just a minute, because this is the chart that gets to domain 3. Certainly not going to go into the details of it, and I don't know that you can see everything on the screen there. But basically, the way this chart works is every one of those boxes can be a yes or a no. And so if I'm looking at, I'll do one example here. If I'm looking at all my students in all my students in reading, then in order to get a yes there, you'll see I think it's 44%, if I can read that. 44%. If I have 44% of my students that reach that, then I get a yes there. If I get 45% of my students, I still get the yes, but I don't get a bigger yes, it's just a yes. So I just have to hit that criteria. So you can scan across, you can see all the different criteria for all the different boxes. The key here is I just need lots of yeses. So every time I hit one of those criterion, I get a yes. But notice how many there are. I mean, there's about 80 or 90 of them on that chart. And so the main thing is that I just want lots of yeses on this chart. These are supposed to stay consistent for 5 years. They were the same as they were last year as they are this year, with one exception, and that is at the bottom. I think that circle didn't get quite on the bottom ELP component there, but that red circle that's supposed to be over that 36%, that was at 42% last year, that went to 36% this year. And I'll give a quick explanation for that. Is over the last 4 years, that TELPAS test that we give that actually goes into that calculation changed. And so last year when they did the scoring on that, we were at the 42%. We actually met that criteria last year at the 42%, but when they changed the test and did a new calculation on the new test, the scores across the state went down. It wasn't just us, it went down across the state, to the point that when the scores came out, everybody was still looking at the 42%. There were a lot of districts that didn't make that, including us. That TEA and the Department of Ed in Washington, they worked out a waiver to where they could lower that to 36%, because it's really more of a USDE component, not a state component. Now, however, we still didn't meet that component at the 36%, but we got closer. We were at 35%, so we're almost there. But still, a lot of districts across the state missed that. But the key component there is the test changed and become a much difficult criterion to meet, went from 42% to 36%. All the rest of the components on there were at the same level as they were last year. The idea here, you want to hit the percentages, get the yeses. So when we look at closing the gaps, the elementary middle school, these are the breakdowns: the academic achievement, STAR growth, English language proficiency, and then that domain score on the STAR component only. You'll see the breakdowns there. Each elementary middle school are rated off of those 4 components, and then the high schools and the districts are rated off of these components here. So there's 6 components total, but only 4 go into each area there. So the one I want to spend a little bit of time on is this one right here, because this is what went into our calculation for the district. You'll see the academic achievement at 50%, the graduation rate at 10%, the ELP at 10%, and then the CCMR at 30%. So notice we've talked a little bit about the CCMR. We had a big increase in that this year. So it's a 30% component of Domain 1, but you'll also notice that ELP component there is 10%. So that's the area that we lost out of the system as far as last year. I believe our World Languages Department is working on some strategies to actually address that this year. All right, so let's talk about how that works into the ratings. We're familiar with the concept of the A to F. I want to spend just one quick slide on this that gives kind of a visual with respect to when I talk about raw score versus scaling. Just because I get a percentage of, say, 40%, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's an F. That may correlate to a scale score of a 60, 70, 80, or 90. So I've given just a really quick chart here that just kind of gives some examples. And so when I do a raw score, maybe I do the percentages on domain 1, where I add all those up and divide by 3. But I may look at a 40%, but that actually may correlate to, say, a 68 on the scale score conversion chart. Or I may be up at the top where it says 62%, and that may relate over to a 91 as far as a scale score. So don't want to get into the details of that. There are some formulas, I've shown those there. It's the idea there, though, is that there's just a conversion process that goes from the raw score to the scale score. Okay, this is the slide. This is where it gets exciting. So you'll see here, we have the 2018. See if I get my laser pointer going here again, just a moment. Or maybe not, that's all right. So you'll see that 2018, oops, somebody's helping me there. There it is. All right. That 2018 column there, so those were our scores from last year, and then right next to it is the 2019 column. So I'm going to kind of walk through those and then show the differences and what made the difference in the score from last year to this year. So those first 3 components, we just talked about those, the STAR, EOC, CCMR, and the graduation rate. That goes into this Domain 1 score. So this horizontal line here is the Domain 1, and then domain 2A, and then domain 2B. So I've got these kind of blocked off here because the idea is that the way the calculation works is they take the higher of the three. So last year, we had 3 scores, 73, 80, and a 79. The first step is take the higher of those 3, which I've got bolded there in the green, which is an 80. If I move over to 2019, you can see the same concept. We had 79, 79, and an 88. In this case, we took the 88, which was higher, which is domain 2B. I've highlighted the 80 and the 88. That's where the 8-point gain came in this component of the scoring mechanism. The big factor there, you'll see the economic advantage that I've highlighted, the 65% to the 72%. That was a major player in there that goes back into that little colored chart that I just went over. And then the other component, there's some components up here that actually come down to this calculation, CCMR being one of them. So you had kind of the double whammy where you had CCMR went into that calculation, increased in economic disadvantage. That made a huge difference there going from the 80 to the 88. Then you come down to domain 3. So you take one of those, 70% of it, and that's part of the grade. Then you come down to these components here. That's that domain 3 that we'd like to, that's what I call the yes page, is get lots of yeses. That's what you're trying to get, is lots of yeses. There's 4 major components there that you're trying to get yeses on. This column here is the percentage in that area. So here we had 43% yeses, 11% yeses, 100% yeses, which is basically that ELP component, which is the only one category. And then 25% yeses on CCMR. But look what happens when we go to domain to 2019. An increase. We lost the ELP component there, and that's only one group, and so you either get it or you don't. It's all or nothing. There's no in between there. It's either 100% or 0%. But now look what happens to CCMR. We went from 25% to 100%. We hit every single indicator on the CCMR. That was huge. That gives us this domain score of 80 here for domain 3. So we're taking the 80 here and the 88 above, and you do the percentages, and that comes out to the 86 with the B. I may stop there just a minute and see if you have questions. To me, this is the big page right here. This is very exciting. All right, I'm going to keep moving, but be sure to stop me if you.
Ms. Fowler?
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Can you explain to me why on the English language proficiency it's a 0?
Yes, so let me see if I can go back to that one page. That's why I spent a little bit of time on that. Okay, so it's kind of small because there's so much stuff on this page here. But notice there's only one group where that red circle was supposed to be. I think it kind of got moved a little bit. But there's only one group there. And so you either hit that target and you get 100% credit, or you don't hit it and you get 0% credit. It's winner take all. You either get all of it or you don't get anything.
And what goes into that credit?
So that's a TELPAS test. Basically, it's a growth measure for our English language learners. So they take their score from last year and they see if they made progress for this year. And then if you get 36% of them making progress, you get the credit.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Back down to my page here. And so this 100% here on the CCMR, I've got a little bit of a chart there. So this is the Ys for CCMR. Last year in 2018, we hit 3 of them. We had white, 2 or more races, and then the ELs. But now if you look at this year, that's where we hit all 100% of them. That's a lot of groups. So when I say 100%, it's not like we increased 1 or 2 groups. I mean, we hit a whole lot of groups there that we didn't hit last year. That was a big takeaway from the score this year. Okay, so we're going to keep moving. We've talked a little bit about ratings. I don't want to hit that slide. Get into some of the other data that I think is exciting. So this is the kind of overall, you may see this on our data chart there in Conference Room B. We had a +8 increase in the district. I'm just looking at that right column there. So we gained 8 points for the district, 7 points on average at the high schools, 1 point on average at the junior highs, and then 3 points on average at the elementary schools. Dr. Wirtz had indicated or had referred to this slide earlier, so I'm just going to break it down just a little bit more as far as we like to compare ourselves to large districts and we like to compare ourselves to like districts with respect to economic disadvantage. So we went through and we found all 44 districts that were 30,000 students or more. So I'd consider those large districts. Out of those, you'll see that where we had this +8 here, that was our gain from last year. There were only 2 districts in the state of Texas that outgained us, a +9 and a +10. I believe that was Clean ISD and San Antonio ISD. Only 2, and it's not like they outgained us by much. It's just a +9 or a +10. 5 other districts had a +8, but these are those 36 other districts that Dr. Wirtz was indicating earlier, and they had anywhere from a -3 to a 7. So I think that's huge. We outpaced 36 of the 44 large districts in the state of Texas. I think that's huge. Another way to look at that is if I compare ourselves to all districts in the state of Texas, just looking at this right column here, last year we were at the 34th percentile. Basically, we performed as well or better than 34% of those districts, whereas this year we performed as well or better than 47% of those districts. I think that's a huge improvement. Still not quite across that median, that 50 percentile, but when I compare ourselves to like districts, so this is that 400 districts or so that Dr. Wirtz was indicating earlier. These are all the districts in the state of Texas who were ±10%. We went from the 42nd percentile, we crossed that median to the 63rd percentile. I think that's a big deal right there. That's a big gain. That's 21 points, 21 percentile gain in 1 year, which I think is huge. Keep going here. So distinctions, we're going to go through these pretty quickly. I won't hit all the different areas there just for the sake of time. Those are the major categories. You have all the content areas except for writing. You have the top 25% of comparative growth, and then also the closing the gaps in the post-secondary readiness. So typically what I do at this point in time is I'm just going to go through these slides slowly. I'm not going to go through all the names. I'll mention the top of the slide, but these are the campuses who got a distinction, which I think is really cool when you have this many campuses that are getting at least one distinction. And so I'm going to start here with the reading. And so you'll see that we had 3 at the high school level, 5 at the junior highs, and then 9 at the elementaries. You can see them listed there. We moved to the math. You can see that we had 3 at the high school level, 5 at junior highs, and then 6 at the elementary. Science with 4 at the high schools, 4 at the junior highs, and 8 at the elementaries. And in social studies, you had 4 at the high schools and 4 at the junior highs. Remember, elementary doesn't have a social studies test, so they're not eligible for that. Academic growth, Seguin at the high school, and we had 8 junior highs and then 6 elementaries. Closing the gaps, 3 high schools, 5 junior highs, and 5 elementaries. And in post-secondary readiness, 1 high school, 5 junior highs, and then 10 elementaries. And then you may have noticed on every slide there was Bailey. They hit 7 out of 7, which is outstanding. Spend just a minute on the 2019 accountability calendar. Not going to go through all the details here. The one that I'm specifically interested in, the one I'm specifically interested in is that September 13th date. That's the deadline for the appeals. We do have one campus that we are looking at appealing. That would be Berry Elementary, where we actually submitted some writing scores. We did this, you may recall, we did this I think 2 years ago with Short Elementary, where we resubmitted some writing scores. We got back some improvements on those. It changed the calculation for the campus. In this particular case, when we started doing the research on it, we needed one more score to be at a certain level, one more student score to be at a certain level in writing. And then our math would work out for them to be at a 60 or a 60, actually a 63. It goes up a little bit higher. We sent scores off. We got scores back. 2 of those students changed enough, so actually we had 2 scores instead of the 1 score. So we feel like we have an extremely strong appeal there for Berry. So we were successful with that 2 years ago with Short. We feel like we would be successful with that this year unless something weird happens that we don't know about. Again, there's lots of rules that kind of get weird. I think that is my section. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown.
President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. We've had an opportunity now to hear about the accountability, to talk about our vision for the work we're engaging in. So today I'm going to talk to you about some strategies that we're using to make sure that we are supporting our schools that need the most support. And so first, I want to talk about the Strategic Support Network. So you may recall last year, for the first time, we formed the Strategic Support Network that would really be able to cluster schools to offer strategic and balanced support to the schools who needed it most. Last year, we had 7 schools in that network, and I wanted to share some results for the 7 schools that we had. So of those 7 schools, 5 of those schools met standard. So we're very proud of the work that they engaged in. And as you look at the top 10 schools in our district that had the most growth, 4 of those came from the Strategic Support Network. In terms of improved performance from 2018 to 19, 5 of the 7 had improved performance, and 1, which was Spear, had the same performance. And then we had 1 that dropped 1 point. We had 3 schools that advanced a whole letter grade, and Anderson Elementary actually advanced from an F campus to a very high C, so we're very proud of them as well. And 3 of our 7 campuses had a double-digit overall gain in performance. So we felt like with those strategic supports, we were able to make headway with some of those campuses, and so we're going to continue that work this year with the Strategic Support Network. However, we're adding more schools, but we're also adding more supports. So this is a list of our Strategic Support Network for this year. As you can see, it does include schools from different feeders in our district, elementaries mostly, and we have 1, Sam Houston High School. Dr. Jarko, who's in the back, is going to be leading this work with the SSN this year, and he also will have the support of our school improvement team, who many of them are here tonight. So thank you all for staying late. Our Director of School Improvement, Dr. Christina Turner, our Coordinator, Melinda Schweig, and our instructional facilitators. And I'll talk to you more specifically about the work they'll engage in to really help be able to move the schools forward. So we took these Strategic Support Network schools and we really clustered them into priority, making sure that we're able to differentiate and scaffold our supports for the schools based on their specific needs. So we have 5 schools that fall into priority 1, 5, and 2, and we have 4 in priority 3. We know the data would indicates and shows us that some schools need a little bit more, even though they're all in the Strategic Support Network. So I'll talk to you about some of those strategies in just a moment. So you have the slide in your packet that really just outlines, of course, our district, as Dr. Barlow mentioned, is an 86. I think we all have that number etched in our brains because we're so proud of that work, but it shows you overall the picture of all of our schools in our system, lots of celebrations, and also some additional work that we want to engage in to make sure we're moving the needle with lots of our other schools as well. So our school improvement team, that's who they are. As I mentioned, they're here in the audience today, and we're very excited about the work they're going to be able to engage in, not only with the Strategic Support Network, but also improving our systems of support for all of our schools. And I'll share with you, we have more schools who need a little bit more support, and they're going to be knee-deep in getting that work done for them. So all of our improvement efforts are going to be focused around the Effective Schools Framework. And this is TEA's developed framework, research-based practices that really highlights prioritized levers that we should focus on as we're looking at improving outcomes for schools. That first one really about leadership, making sure we have strong leadership at the campuses, that we're effectively planning. Lever 2 is around supporting teachers, so arming them with the tools and resources they need to effectively teach and learn in their classrooms. Lever 3 is positive school culture, high quality curriculum, which is how we're supporting the campuses at the district level, and then making sure we have quality, effective instruction for all of the students in our classrooms. So what I've done is really just kind of elevated a few of these strategies with each of these effective school framework levers. It's not an exhaustive list of all the resources these campuses will get, but it gives you an idea of some of the specialized support. So all of the area superintendents who you know are hardworking leaders in our district, they prioritize executive coaching based on the needs of the leader and of course the needs of the campus. We also want to make sure that this year, with the help of our instructional facilitators, they're going to be going out to the campuses in partnership with teaching and learning to ensure that we have literacy supports, instructional supports in those classrooms, as literacy, of course, is our focus this year for our district. And our director of school improvement has a big job, and part of her job is working in concert with the area superintendents and making sure that we're tracking the progress on our data and our improvement plans to make sure we're making the progress that we need to across the schools that are in state required improvement. And then the effective schools work framework, which I shared with you a moment ago. There are some schools who you have in your packet as well who'll be required to undergo an audit. And that audit will really basically highlight each of these levers, see what's working well in the school, see what's not working, and then recommend have some suggestions for recommended strategies to strengthen the lever for that particular school. As you look at effective, well-supported teachers, we know that we have solid teachers in our district. We have some that need additional support. So we want to make sure that we leverage the support that we have in our system, including coaching for 6 of these campuses. So these are 6 campuses, elementary campuses, and 1 high school, Sam Houston, who will receive training, which we will call our horizontal laser team. Basically for that, each teacher on the K-6 elementary campus will receive individualized coaching on those best practices that Dr. Wirtz referenced earlier, all around best practices in teaching and learning. So 6 of our priority campuses will receive this. Sam Houston will receive supports in English 1 and English 2, which continue to be, we've had some growth, but areas of opportunity for our high schools as well. We wanted to make sure that we were looking at in a human resources capacity at these campuses and making sure that we were strategic in who we offered class size waivers to. So if it's an improvement required campus, want to make sure that we are keeping those class sizes as small as possible to really be able to maximize teaching and learning in the classes. When we're looking at surplus teachers, because we know that we do our best at making sure we have teachers who are in the right fit for schools, giving priority consideration to some of our improvement required schools, et cetera, and other campuses to ensure they have the right fit teachers who are brought to their campuses as well. And then making sure we're partnering with HR. So as we have any kind of vacancy that pops open in any of these campuses, strategically working with our recruitment team to try to find solid teachers to go in and support these campuses. And then as we anticipate vacancies, thinking about how can we offer early contracts to those teachers to secure them early enough in the spring so we know that we have a full load of teachers starting the school year. And the third one is a really impactful one. That's positive school culture. Sometimes the more challenging the work is, the lift that you have to do at a campus when it's underperforming, sometimes it can have a negative impact on culture. So this is a very important lever we want to make sure we don't lose sight of. And part of that is making sure we partner with the social emotional learning team and the PBIS team to make sure that we are equipping teachers and leaders with the resources they need to engage in restorative practices, restorative circles, and really find ways to reduce disciplinary infractions, and also working with our social workers to help in doing some monitoring, some small group work with some of our challenging students as well. Increasing support and RTI services. So as we have these students who may be struggling with Tier 1 instruction, how are we strengthening our support of those students and putting them through the process to get them the resources and support that they need as well? Partnering with our PACE department, we have a great team here, offering Parent University. How can we re-engage and engage more parents in the academic portion of helping support our kids get better? We know that our leadership and our teachers and our students have responsibilities. We want to make sure we get as many parents as we can in to help support academically and pushing these students forward. And then just getting feedback from parents, from stakeholders, from constituents to find out what are some continual improvement efforts that we can engage in to make sure that our schools are performing at the level they need to. So effective instruction, that's really what it's all about, making sure we have solid teaching and solid learning happening in the classroom. Our facilitators who are here tonight are going to really provide a lot of literacy, learning, coaching, professional development to core sets of our teachers to make sure our improvements in literacy is happening at the level that we want it to. Engaging in our summative assessment, so we know that we have to make sure that that's all of our campuses are that we are assessing mastery of the taught curriculum, and that will not be unique to SSN, but it's important that we have a regular way to gauge how much are we making progress towards the goals. We certainly we look at data all the time in our senior staff meetings. Dr. Barlow brings us lots of data to examine, and we don't want to be surprised by anything. So as we can have those regular checkpoints, we'll be able to know when a school is in danger of struggling and how we can provide immediate intervention. And then, of course, I mentioned our audits of our prioritized campuses, our literacy learning labs with our instructional facilitators, and making sure our campus leaders are engaging teachers in prescriptive coaching, observation, coaching, and feedback. So again, it's all about all of us getting better every single day, one of our tenets, and their work in engaging teachers and making sure they're getting stronger in their instruction. So the Office of School Leadership, of course, we can't do it alone. We have lots of partnerships with people around the system. We're all focused on a singular goal. So you can see there all the partners that we have in making sure our campuses have the resources and the support and guidance they need to make improvements at the campus level. So I want to talk briefly about next steps. Dr. Cavazos referenced early in the presentation. There will be a lot of conversations around the interventions that are required. We used to use the word sanctions, now they're interventions. They sound much more positive, interventions. Basically, with our accountability this year, and much of this is new, so I'll just kind of briefly highlight this. Schools are actually labeled or identified in 4 areas. Improvement required, which we know about that. There's comprehensive support. If a campus is a comprehensive support identified campus, that means they either failed to meet the 67% graduation rate, or they fell in the bottom 5% of schools when you look at closing the achievement gaps in Domain 3, which is what Dr. Barlow referenced. So we don't have many comprehensive support schools, but we do have one that's been re-identified, and that's Venture High School. And so I wanted to share that with you, and you have that on your documentation as well. So basically, any school that is listed on this document has to write an improvement plan. That will be board approved, that you'll have an opportunity to review, ask questions, and give feedback. Parents will have an opportunity also to be able to attend a meeting at the campus to be able to give input as well on the improvement planning process. I also want to highlight a couple of additional things that are new for 2019. IR and comprehensive was already in place, but this year we have targeted support, and we have additional targeted support. So as you look at this list for targeted support, if you have a school, for example, who has one student group who failed to meet the mark 3 years in a row, Dr. Barlow talked about those groups. For example, special education, who may fail to meet the mark in 17, 18, and 19, you'll see a T next to their name. That's the targeted support campus. Additional targeted is a campus that in 1 year, only in the 2018-19 school year, that they had subpar performance in one student group and one area, and those are only for reading and math. So I wanted to show this because it's pretty massive in terms of a list. But again, you have schools on this list that may have strong Bs. Young is an A campus, and they're required to write an improvement plan. So there are a lot of implications for many of our campuses in our district. Further, you can actually have an A rating, and if you have one D in one of the 3 domains, you're also required to write an improvement plan. So it is complex. Some of the information is still kind of unraveling, and we're learning more as we go. We'll share more information with you as we get updates from TEA, but I wanted to share what's coming next in terms of how we'll apprise you of how we're supporting all of these schools in the improvement planning process, and the requirements will be of us to make sure we're getting them what they need to make improvements in those domains.
So one thing I just wanted to emphasize or reiterate what Dr. Brown just mentioned as well about all of those plans is, as she mentioned, it looks like a lot. And the thing I would just keep in mind about that is every campus, regardless of what your rating is, will write a campus improvement plan. And the essence of all of these plans at the real basic level is that it's to increase growth in areas where gaps exist. And so even if you were an A school, we would still want you to write a continuous improvement plan. This is just a more targeted way of doing it. So there's always room for growth is what I would like to say. The last thing I wanted to share with you a little bit is around our focus on literacy. You probably heard that referenced over and over and over tonight. We have a concentrated effort around improving literacy in Arlington ISD, and we have specific targeted goals that I'm going to be coming back later on in the fall to share specifically with you. Part of House Bill 3 also references the need for districts to create literacy plans specifically for early childhood reading. That is will be part of our plan that I'll share with you. But we're also looking for increasing literacy across the board. We're looking at our English 1 and 2 students. We're looking at how kids are performing at the junior high level. We're looking about how kids are actually performing in the primary grades. And so what we're working at as a system to do right now is to make sure we align all of our efforts We have a balanced literacy program that we are effectively rolling out to the district to create a strong baseline across the district that's aligned to these best practices we talked about. There are structures and systems being put in place in the school improvement office to bring those parts together as well. And so when I come back in a few weeks and share with you our literacy plan, you'll see how some of these places kind of come together. But I wanted to highlight it tonight because you did hear it referenced multiple times throughout the conversation this evening in terms of the practices that, for example, Dr. Brown's office is putting in place to support schools, and their targeted efforts are around literacy. I say that one more thing about that is the focus on literacy does not implicate or does not indicate that we're perfect in every other area. The idea is if we can create a strong focus around some of the highest leverage points, it does begin to make having a stronger impact across other areas. If you think about social studies or you think about science, that's simply mathematics and reading are articulated around specific content areas. We know that kids who can read and write well think well, and they do well in all of their content areas. And so our efforts are to improve that across our district. So with that, we are all three happy to take questions since Diego is gone. He's here in spirit.
Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Thank you, Dr. Barlow. Thank you, Dr. Brown. This is a discussion item. Questions from trustees. Dr. Reich?
I don't have questions. I guess I'd like to start my comments with congratulations. And that's to everybody in the district, not the state and not the micromanaging of the accountability system that we're beholden to. The move from 78 to 86, and I congratulate this board as well. The desire that we asserted was we've got to stick to our strategic plan. We've got to keep moving forward with all of these innovative approaches, but, and it was a big but, we have to somehow temper that and not abandon that with growth in the accountability. And you guys have done it. It's just remarkable. Dr. Cavazos, everybody in the district, the teachers, oh my gosh, it's just phenomenal. As I've said over other topics over the course of the past few years, everything that I really appreciate in this district, and Dr. Wertz, you're a big part of that, is the extra intelligent approach to everything, whether it's with this, with the surveying, with the testing of the kids, the assessments. It's always an intelligent approach and a strategic design. It's very targeted, and it's the results are showing. And you may recall years ago, I said many times, my tagline was, "I'm patiently impatient." And there is still room. We are still growing, but my gosh, I think we have tipped the scale. We're there. Thank you. Thank you so much. On behalf of the community, this is such a big win. I would challenge any district to look, or for us to look at any district that has any kind of an approach like this. It is just across the board. And being able to shift and be nimble in such a large system to provide the resources necessary, specific resources, one-on-one training for every teacher, while at the same time being focused on leadership, while being focused on the same time of changing the culture, always into a more positive culture, which I think it's more so than it has ever been, is just phenomenal. And that's why I started my comments with applause. I would just keep doing it the entire evening. Our 2014 bond package, with our strategic plan, our first strategic plan that led partly to that 14 bond package, moving onward to go from what we were to what we are to probably where we're going in the future on the accountability system, which is not an accurate measure, as we've all said. And with the courage of this board putting out there for the voters to consider a much needed bond to carry this even further into the future for student equity and access and opportunity it's just unparalleled. It gives me chills just thinking about it. So no questions, just lots of kudos. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Mr. Hogg?
Thank you, President Mays. Dr. Wirtz and the entire staff, I think Dr. Reich is right. Thank you, especially Dr. Barlow for breaking this down of some of our improvements. I think it makes a big difference. On the same note, you know, it's hard to not do comparisons with everyone, just human nature. The Dallas Morning News had an article out and it showed every district kind of in the region and the amount of schools and what you ranked and all those. And we've talked about this A through F and all the flaws, especially in elementary schools, how you get judged and those type of things. So I've intentionally tried not to talk about the A through F, but it is human nature. And that human nature also causes parents to drive to that. It's hard. It's hard to look at those C, D, and F schools and some of those comparisons and not say, what are we doing to get better? And Dr. Wirtz, I really appreciate the talk on literacy. I know we've done some beta tests. We're doing some things around the district to try some of those. And I especially appreciate the school improvement team sitting in here. Y'all have a big task. And we're not going to make it easy. It's going to be harder. And we've got to keep constantly improving. I think overall, when we look at all this, but unfortunately, what A through F does, which we know is the problem, is people see just a tiny little snapshot. And if we could get every citizen to sit there and listen to this presentation, they'd never come to another board meeting again. Let's just say that. But, you know, I think they start to somewhat understand, but unfortunately, it's not easier to understand. It's not a system, but it is a system we're having to deal with. So we know, and I appreciate the plans we have for those C, D, and Fs, because we've got to increase those schools and have less of those, plain and simple. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat and say, I'm glad with the amount of Cs. Well, when I did that C comparison to all the districts, you know, we've got a lot. We've got a high percentage on there. There's some other districts around us that love to have those numbers we have. There's others that are like, ooh, those are pretty tough. But overall, we see progress. And as a board, for all these years, we've been talking about how do we make sure we're progressing each year. And I truly do believe we're progressing each year. As I heard some of the school improvement plans, I always get worried of saying, are we overtraining and delaying, distracting from time and those type of things? But I'm also going to leave it in the hands of professionals that are professional teachers and understand how to do that. You know, I can talk a lot of industries and a lot of things, and I can talk a lot of education, but that's not my trained profession. So I am going to trust you guys and y'all's plans because I know the work you have. I have to say thank you, but also I have to say to the school improvement team, to Ms. Brown, to Dr. Wirtz, whatever plans we need to have for those C, D, and Fs to improve, I think you've got 7, 8 years that are ready to act. Because we all, no matter what your scores are in this thing, we're always going to say, what have you done for me lately and what do you do for next year? Right? It's just human nature, and I hate to say that, but I'm always going to want you to improve because we always talk about progress. So even if you were all A's, we're going to say, how do we get to that little better step of an A? It's just what we're going to push and trying to do. And so I commend the progress. I commend the scores of what we've done. I commend the planning to where we're going to get. I'm going to say we're going to push you more. And that's our job, is to try and push as far as we possibly can and get the most as we can for every single student and citizen in this community. And I thank you, because overall, Dr. Reich, you're right. This is a great step up from where we're going. And I have to thank the entire team of school improvement there and every teacher across the districts that's bought into this active learning. Because I know when you created the active learning cycle, people are like, what are you people doing on this? I think we may have said that a couple of times until we started truly understanding where the process was going. And I do think it is the right steps going forward. So I commend you, Dr. Cavazos, and your entire staff, and all of our teachers and all of our staff for buying in and working towards progress. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Mr. Chapa.
Thank you, President Mays. This question might be for Dr. Wertz, might be for Dr. Barlow. I have heard that, as complicated as this system is, that there is some, I don't know if it's discretion or what you would call it, but there is an ability for the TEA to essentially force fail campuses under certain scenarios. Is that correct? And can you explain that to me if it is?
Yeah, he can do that in detail, but the answer is yes. There are situations where you could technically have a certain category that will force you to get like a B when you qualify for an A. That actually happens. It can happen at the district level too, so if you want to give the details.
Yeah, that's a great question, and probably the best example of that would be Barry right now. They actually, when we calculate them, they actually come out to be a D, but they have the 3 Fs, and so you have the 4 domains. You have that, or domain 1, then 2A and B, and then domain 3. So if you have 3 Fs, even if your calculation comes out overall to be a D, you still get the F. And so that's kind of what's happened to them. So that appeal that I was talking about earlier, what we're trying to do is push one of those up, and then it lets the math go in and actually calculate the final score, and we actually feel like we'll get above that 60 there.
Dr. Barlow, it's also a SPEAR, isn't it? SPEAR is in the same situation as a forced failure.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, they are too. Yes, absolutely.
So in recognizing that Wimbish is no more not really calculated here, so essentially all but one of the schools that we have on IR were force failed. Is that what you're saying?
No, it was the 2, I believe, I'm trying to remember now. I think it was the 2 that were force failed and the 2 that they just didn't have the score there.
Okay.
But, so that's, yeah.
It was 2, yeah, taking Wimbish out of the picture, it's 2 out of the 3. That's correct. Okay.
Yes, oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
I understand the question, yes.
Were there any other campuses that, they got a higher grade, but they were in the same situation where they were essentially knocked down because of a rule like that?
No, that right now that just applies to that between the F and the D. Now, when you get up into the upper ratings, so for example, with a district that's trying to get into an A, if they have an F campus, well, then they couldn't be an A. They'd be held at an 89 there and be a B.
Okay. And I was looking through some of the scores for the different domains and how they're broke down, and so we had several campuses where I saw this happen, and maybe you could help me explain a little bit better. How do we have a campus that say has an overall rating of A, or their academic achievement is an A, but then they're closing the gaps, or their academic growth score is a D? I hear a lot from the TEA about how this new system is supposed to be more transparent and easier for parents to understand, but I got kids of my own in this district, and so, when I look at that, I have, I don't find it transparent or easier to understand because I'm looking at campuses that I'm kind of getting mixed signals on. So what should I, how do I decipher that radio noise?
So are you asking, like, if I have a high-performing campus, but they have one domain that is...
or even maybe 2, maybe they have an overall C or an academic achievement, or sorry, an overall A or academic achievement at A, but some of the grades down the list are C's or D's.
So that typically goes into that, we pick the higher of the 3, and so I could have a really high score in one of those that domain 1, 2, or 2B. So I could have a really high score in one of those that actually helps me move my overall score up, but then I could have a lower score in one of the others, or 2 of the 3. And so that's typically where that would happen. So that then my overall score comes out, say a B or a low A or something like that, but I have one of those or 2 of those lagging.
Okay.
I don't know if that...
So I think it also depends on what the category is that you're thinking about. So for example, in student achievement, we would measure what level they pass at, whether they approach, meets, or masters. They add up all those points and then you get your score. The other one is around progress and relative progress. So progress, for example, school progress, you're looking at how kids are improving from year to year. So your student achievement score might be high because they actually passed, but they didn't pass any better than they did the year before. I'm making it simple, and so they're not earning points on that side. So in essence, you could have a situation where your student achievement score is high, but your progress isn't that high because they're not actually achieving at higher levels from year to year. They're just hitting the pass mark.
Okay.
So-
So in that scenario, so what happens to a campus that's consistently, let's say, high performing in academic achievement? Are they inevitably going to get a lower score on academic growth because they just don't have as far to move up, or is there a way that the system accounts for that?
So, yeah, so that gets a little tricky. Let's say that you have a campus where everybody's performing extremely high, that master's level. You know, we talked about the approaches, meets, and masters. So if they're performing at that master's level, they'll always get the growth point. Even though they didn't actually grow, they'll always get the growth point. It's actually one of those sides that I want to flip back to it. But so you're trying to, if students are performing low in some fashion, then you're trying to get growth. But once they get to the top of that test, as long as they keep performing at the top of that test, that student will always get the growth point. So you could actually have a large percentage or a high percentage of your students performing on domain 1 where you get that meets and masters. They'll also get that growth measure too because they're performing at that master's level.
The reason why the student achievement score can still be high is because it depends on what level they actually pass. So for example, a student who passed at the master's level, they get credit for approaches, they get credit for meets, and they get credit for masters. If they just pass at approaches level, they get credit for approaches only, they only get 1 point. So basically when there's a threshold that he described with like when there's a threshold for what you'd have to get to earn a certain grade, you could essentially as a school have high achievement as a grade, but have lots of kids that haven't necessarily gotten to the master's level. So they'll continue, their score as an A will continually be high, but their progress level might not necessarily be there if they're not making gains from year to year. Does that make sense?
It does, and I understand now why y'all have doctor before your name. Because I mean, and and I understand that, but I would find it hard to believe that, our average parents would understand that. And so in the same presentation, Dr. Barlow, you mentioned the word algorithm. We've got boxes to check. You said you have had to call TEA multiple times about obscure rules, some of them not in the manual. And whenever I hear somebody talk about this is a new, transparent, easy to understand system, I want to pull my hair out because that's just not true. So Mr. Hogg and Dr. Reich very eloquently explained, how proud we are of the strides that have been made in this district. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I think we were knocking it out of the park in many aspects and doing very, very well last year with our 78. And I know that some people are going to have issue with me saying, "Oh, you were fine with the C." And we had 95% of our campuses that met standard. We had almost half of them that had distinctions, at least one distinction. I think we were doing quite well, and I don't think that this district is a meaningfully different district to me. Because we have an 86 class this year compared to 78 last year, but I recognize that it has its value. So saying that though, and recognizing that people focus on that, so how, I took statistics a long time ago, Dr. Barlow, and I'm gonna butcher a whole lot of stuff here, but my understanding is that when you have a test like this, you want it to be statistically valid, and for that to happen, you shouldn't see large scale changes from one application to another, and it looks like we had quite a bit of growth compared to our peer campuses. So how do we know that growth reflects, where we really are versus, are we upticking up and we're gonna revert back to the mean? Like I said, I'm gonna butcher a lot of stuff, but how do I know that this is which is the truer reflection of where we are?
Yeah, so what I hear when you say true reflection, so I'm thinking true score, and we never actually know what our true score is when in a statistical or a measurement class. And so that's what really gets tricky is we have data, we can run data all day long, but what does that actually measure and what are we actually trying to understand from that? So I don't really have an answer for that because that's the trick with trying to interpret all of the data that we've generated is how do we actually understand what this means and what it reflects. What we know right now is that the numbers that we've generated this year fell into all the right categories and all the right situations where we generated the 86. We do believe we're making improvement, but to actually understand and interpret all of that as far as what the direction of those numbers mean, that's the difficult part. And that true score that you're kind of referring to, that's always the difficult part as far as trying to understand the data.
Okay.
One thing that I would just add to that is the constitution of the actual score. And there is a distinct difference in what happened this year from what happened last year. So if you remember the slide at the beginning where he talked about 40%, 40%, 20%, like how much academics took space and how much CCMR takes space and how much graduation took space and TELPAS or the ESL or the ELPS score. One of the differences, if you'll look on that one slide that has the green on there that shows the gains, academic achievement did go up. One of the big triggers for us this year that was significant was the number of students who actually were counted as an indicator for college, career, military readiness. We went from 25 points to 100 points. And that is a reflection of counting kids or making sure that kids are actually, we're like making sure their credit is like recorded for the certifications that they earn, for their AP exams that they are actually passing, for their interest in the military, making sure those things are actually happening, earning points across all of those demographics is, in my mind, a true measure because there's a distinct, they either did have it or they didn't. There's no ambiguity around there. You either get the Y or you don't. Last year, there were three indicators. We got that in 3 categories. This year, we had them in all of the categories, 100%, I think there were 12. So to me, that's one way to kind of answer your question. If you wanted to say which is the beginning or which is the true point, I think there is some data that is distinctly different between those 2 years where we can actually mark, wow, we put a system in place that captured something that wasn't there before, and we can see it evidenced in our outcomes this year. In terms of like academic achievement, it's a complex question about why scores go up and when scores don't go down. And every cohort of students is unique, as we all know. There are multiple factors that go into whether a school does well or doesn't do well. I think as a system, we look to see, are there system trends? And if so, can we impact those trends? And when schools are outliers, we have this support team put in place to figure out what is the root cause for why those schools aren't actually occurring. But as a system, the overall grade, I think the reason for our grade moving up this year, I think we can pinpoint it to specific things that I think are a true marker of some growth, to be honest.
Okay. And I'm just about done, but you at one point, Dr. Barlow had a graph up here that showed, as it looks like they tried to account for socioeconomic status, and it kind of a nice curve to it. And the data wasn't from this last administration of the test.
That was just an example.
Just an example. Oh, okay.
It was just an example of how it works throughout the state.
What is your sense of how, I know that the state has promised that they were going to try to, because these test scores almost universally correlate with socioeconomic status, that they were going to try to control for that better this year. What's your initial sense of looking at the data of whether or not they were able to accomplish that this year?
I'm not quite sure if I understand your question.
So do you think that the test scores from this year's administration, from what you've seen, do you think that that they did a better job of designing a test that, or at least on the back end, controlling for socioeconomic status in the scores?
I don't know that that's a function of the test as it is that once they take the test, then they control for that when they do the comparison districts. And so that's kind of what this chart here is.
Right.
I don't know that that answers your question. I'm still.
No, that's fine. And is there anything in what TEA does or the controls that they do that account for the level of mobility, student mobility that a campus might have? Do we have some campuses that have quite high student mobility?
So when you get into the whole accountability process, so there's 2 prongs to that. One of those is students that are here on snapshot date and test with you, so that students don't go into the system as far as the accountability process goes unless they're here on snapshot date and they're here on test date. So students who are outside of that, so like let's say they came in January, well then they wouldn't go into the calculation. So that's how they control for mobility. You'll also notice those 2 other categories on there, those new categories, the continuously enrolled and the non-continuously enrolled, so that kind of takes it even a step further. Mm-hmm. So one category is if students were here 3 years ago on snapshot date, that last Friday in October, and then 2 years ago and 1 year ago, and then they're also here this year, that would be a continuously enrolled student. A student who doesn't meet all that criteria would be a non-continuously enrolled student. So that's kind of how they control for that mobility.
Okay.
To answer go back to your last question, I just want to make sure you got your question answered. as he was saying, the test doesn't control for how a student would perform based on their economic status. They just take the test. The threshold for how you earn your points or how you would get your grade is just different.
Right, and I didn't accurately reflect that with my question, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Mr. Wilbanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Mays. I'll be brief. I had two questions, but one was specific to a campus, which I'll be happy to take offline. One that's near and dear to my heart, and that's Venture, and whether this type of test and system is fair for a campus like that we know is doing a lot of great good for some of our most vulnerable students. But my question is for you guys, and you guys might want to tag team on this, but we'll probably start with Dr. Barlow. Kind of in Six Sigma, you want to identify issues as early in the process as possible. And to do that, then doing our forecasting is critical. And I think you guys do a tremendous job. We've got a boardroom full of charts back there. My question to you is, now that you've gone through and you've done this detailed forecasting all year long, trying to identify what your hot campuses for intervention were going to be, how close were your forecasts to what the actual results were? Were they pretty much in line, or is there some improvement on improving that forecast process needed?
Well, we're always trying to improve, and so, as far as any algorithm or calculation that we're doing, we're always looking for ways to improve it. But we felt like we were really close. There were a few surprises, but not many. Typically, like the campuses our campus that we've been discussing, they showed up on what we call a yellow cell on one of those charts at least one time during the year, so we knew at least something was performing low on those campuses. What we typically like to have happen, though, so it gets a little bit tricky, is that as we do those forecasts, what we want to do is we want campuses to kind of work themselves off of those yellow cells. And so even though we have some that we would call a miss, because our forecast or prediction is a miss, what we want to happen there is that we do miss that, and that they work themselves off of that. So we've missed them because they've actually improved and worked themselves away from that. But as far as the predictions, we felt like we were pretty close. Felt like we had some good data there with respect to what campuses we're using to say, okay, if we don't improve, well, then we're going to fall into this area, whether it was a D or a C or an F or whatever.
So were there any surprises, campuses that showed up that we weren't expecting, or any that performed well that we weren't expecting, better than expectations?
Maybe some of the high schools were a little bit higher than what we had anticipated. Again, that kind of goes back to that CCMR component, because that was a little bit hard to track. It was kind of our first year we were really trying to track that component. I'd probably say those were surprises, and those were positive surprises, that they performed a little bit higher than what we were calculating.
Okay. So then the follow-on question for you guys is, now that we're doing that forecasting, you feel like you're getting adequate data early enough in the process so that you can do the interventions in time to make improvements before the actual test day comes?
I would say yes, for sure. And one thing that Dr. Barlow and his team did last year, which helped a lot with our IR schools especially, is really just going to sit with principals and their teams and showing them the data for each of their student groups and how they can appropriately track them. And I know for two of our campuses, one being Anderson, had a 25-point gain this year. And we do attribute it to being really strategic at looking at those student groups. And Kevin's team really helped make that happen. So I definitely believe we're getting the data to be able to provide the interventions needed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Wertz, add your 2 cents.
Oh, I don't have any 2 cents. I'm fine. What'd you say? Common sense?
Diego, have anything to add?
I know, Diego. The one thing I would add to the data, just from my own perspective, is the visualization of the data that Kevin's department actually puts together for staff is very, very helpful. It is very intuitive. It's easy for us to navigate. We can look at data and slice it in multiple different ways. And so the reports that he generates aren't just these PDF files that we get. There's actually a platform that his team put together that allows us to create almost a visualization of data that we want to see that allows us to go all the way from the district level to drill down to the specific student in the classroom, which is pretty phenomenal, to be honest.
As a trustee, I'm a big fan of visualizations too, and it certainly would be nice if we had a platform. As trustees, we could see some nice KPIs that we need to track as trustees as well. So it's great that you guys have that. Maybe one day we'll have that too.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Dr. Cavazos, would you like to
Yeah,
add?
so thank you, President Mays. I'd just like to add a couple of things, starting kind of, I guess, where Mr. Hogg left off. And from the big picture, this is a team effort. And from the board level, from strategic planning, through the organization, to the classroom, to the students, to the community, it is a team effort. And so I think from that perspective, it's important to reflect on the fact that it should be put in its proper perspective. And we know the value of a test, but we also know the value of a test, right? And so I think it's important to put that in perspective. Also, the things that we're trying to accomplish in the school district, transforming the learning experience of a student, right? Implementing full-day pre-kinder, this next bond package, really trying to upgrade facilities for learning spaces and things like that. Having a focus from leadership and support for our principals and our teachers and coaching. So all those components, that's the complexity of public education. People think it may be pretty simple, but it isn't. In that complexity, though, I commend the board for remaining focused and supportive, but not just supportive, but also taking action with budget and otherwise. And so I commend the board first and foremost, but I also thank our principals and our teachers every day for the work that they do in putting this in its proper perspective. We could talk all day about an exam, and it would not be productive. If you never talk about the exam, that's not productive either. So I commend the staff and everyone involved for putting it in its proper perspective and finding those areas where we can make improvements so that our system continues to grow and improve. And I just, as I reflect on that, I think it's important that we continue to put it in perspective, but also focus properly on this. I commend the work of the support network. They've done great work. That's why Mr. Wilbanks, and I think Dr. Barlow is a little humble in his response about predictive value. He challenges his own staff and himself to run a complete analysis that we've already gone over in staff meeting about how close was he or how far was he in his prediction, so that we can continue to strengthen that. But again, I'll emphasize it's a team effort, and our community is very supportive of our school district. And I agree with Mr. Chapa. They were supportive last year, and they're supportive this year. And that's a true sign of a community that supports teaching and learning and success of our students. So from that standpoint, I think, again, commending everyone, but also understanding that our work is very, very much complex and diverse.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Well said. I think that makes the term "it takes a village" broadens the scope, that it truly takes a village of everybody and everyone here. And for our school improvement team, thank y'all very much for being here, and thank you for what you're doing and the support that you're offering, because in the grand scheme of things, the most important thing is equity is the only acceptable goal. So we're going to continue to go with that. So thank y'all very much. And to the students, congratulations. Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Okay, next on our agenda, I do just want to say one more thing. Dr. Barlow, if I had a graph, or if you could graph what was in my mind, we would be off the charts on time. Just saying. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is open forum for non-agenda items. Benjamin, do we have any cards? Thank you. Next on the agenda, our superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mason. Brief report, but a lot of different activities going on. We have been able to start school in a very seamless way, and I want to thank everyone from teachers to principals to senior staff and everybody involved in that. Thank you for a great start of the school year. We started August 10th, actually welcoming, you want to go back one slide? August 10th, welcoming to AT&T Stadium for our back-to-school kickoff, and thank you all for everyone who participated in that. I guess we can't go back one slide anymore. There we go. We can, apparently. Go back one slide. So at AT&T Stadium, I want to really thank, again, the Gene and Jerry Jones Foundation. They support this, they fund this to open the stadium, and then all our volunteers. This is another demonstration of love. So thank you to all for that. We had Operation Inspiration at UTA College Park for over 5,000 of our staff members, and you see some pictures of our wonderful DJ and master of ceremonies and entertainment. We had all kinds of things going on at that convocation, and I just want to thank everyone for the energy that they brought, from staff to teachers to principals, and we are off to a great start. First day of school was Monday, and I had a great day visiting. Started off with transportation, really early in the morning. They thought I was going to have to drive a bus, but I don't have the appropriate certification for that. But however, they were really excited to meet our students. And then we went on to, I won't cover all of them, but Foster Elementary for the red carpet. Went to Piercy, to West, Crow Leadership Academy, talked to students at Berry, and thank you for those who could join us. That young man accessorized me with those things, but he did say, you can't take them. We were told we can't take them. So the little chain things, I had to take them off and put them right back. Yes, indeed. Okay. So also to Miller Pre-K, and we went to the early college as well, and finished off at Wimbish World Language Academy. Thank you for communications and marketing staff for all their Facebook Live and media interviews and things like that. We're off to a great start. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. How exciting. Any trustees with a report? Okay, Ms. Secretary. Okay. Why are you whispering in the mic? Mr. Hogg.
Well, you were skipping over me, President
Mr.
Mays.
Hogg.
It's okay. You probably could skip over me. I just have to thank and say, Dr. Cavazos, you now have, every single board member now has a child that's been or in the AISD, with my oldest starting kindergarten. So proud to be there, but really I wanted to say thank you. Last week we were on a family vacation, we had a critical vote, and I just have to thank Chad and all the IT staff for all the work. It was the first time legislation passed that we could virtually do that, and I said, who would actually ever do that when that legislation passed? I think I was the first one that was like, that's a ridiculous rule they passed. Well, it came in, and of course I was the one who had to use it this last week. So I just wanted to thank all the staff for all the work Frank and you guys did. There was prep on the front side. They had to walk us through it a little bit, and we got it done, and it was, I felt very smooth. I was just looking through a screen, so I felt like it was very smooth. I don't know, I went out here, but I just want to thank all the staff for all the work to get that achieved last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Ms. Secretary, do we have any items to consider? Okay. Well, it is 10:55 p.m., and I want to thank the staff for sticking around with us this evening, and this meeting is adjourned.